Hey everybody, Carolee, how's it going out there? Let's get a little music going. Hopefully everybody can hear me okay. Hello, hello, can you all hear me? Give me a thumbs up if you can hear me. Yay, I got some thumbs up out there. All right. So, hopefully everybody had a wonderful evening so far. Oh, we don't need to hear that too. Okay. So let's get a little music going. I'll try this again. Oh, let's try some good music. There we go. So if anybody happens to know anybody who can throw out a little bit of a couple minute clips of some music for me, point me in that direction. That would be great. Want to get some additional music for us. So I have a wonderful guest as usual. They're all wonderful, all veterans. Happy to have them here. But while we wait for some more people in the chats and to come on, I just want to let you know. So you should be seeing some more shorts drop in here soon, and had some help with that and the best way to get those accomplished. So really excited about that. You'll be seeing some pretty good little clips here and there from some previous shows all the way back to October when I started this channel. So make sure that you drop a like and a comment on those when you see them so I know that they're being viewed. You know how that goes sometimes with the YouTube analytics, doesn't always, show. So, that being said, I want to go ahead and I am going to be introducing my guest. His name is Jim Daigeau, and he is standing by backstage. So everybody give a warm welcome to Jim. Howdy.
Hey, y'all.
How are you tonight?
Great. Happy to be here.
Wonderful.
Thanks, Carolee.
Absolutely. I really appreciate you giving us the opportunity to have this conversation. It's been great getting to know the veterans that we have and hearing the different stories and giving a platform for veterans to be able to talk about what they want to talk about. So I'm happy that you were able to join us tonight.
Happy to join us because, we've been married 30 years and my wife's kind of tired of hearing about it. So,
Well, now it'll be recorded. And so anybody else who cares to listen, you could just point them to the show. It'll be out there.
She's a great person that I'll talk about more later, but really good person. So, and I do, as you know, appreciate you doing this. You've got a vested interest, obviously, with your Marines. So
Yes.
I do appreciate this. And as we talk, I've got a different view than a lot of the guys that you're going to be talking to. I'm a Cold War dude. So
That's okay.
it was a whole different time. And I'll talk more about that. And fortunately, I'm old, so I have lots of experience to draw on. It's not exciting, a lot of it, like some of the other guys, but it's what we'll hear. So, and we'll see what the chat has to say about it too. So,
Absolutely. And the thing about it is everybody, you could have two uh, soldiers, Marines, it doesn't matter, in the exact same spot at the exact same time, and they're going to have different views on what happened and how
yeah,
it happened.
that's true.
And it's your own story. And that's what's important. That's what it's all about. So let's go ahead. Let's see who we've got out here so far in the chats. Of course, we've got Jason. Welcome. Thank you for supporting.
Hey,
Ron
Jason.
Wayne. Welcome.
Ron.
Thank you. And Killian. Hello.
Okay.
Let's see. We have Tennessee Goddess, hello. Yes, make sure you like, share, and subscribe. Let's get everybody out here. So right now, that's who we've got out in the chats. We'll start seeing some more here as time progresses. So that's exciting. Um, oh, just saying, Tennessee Goddess. We were in her neck of the woods yesterday, so that was she missed us by 15 minutes. She said so. That was all right. Um, So let's start off, I guess, by kind of telling me a little bit about your childhood and kind of how
Yeah.
that was for you and your education.
Well, don't hold it against me. I'm a Yankee. I grew up in Massachusetts, central Massachusetts. It was a small town, really interesting as I look back on it, how different it is now, but just a small town in Massachusetts. We had Memorial Day parades, we had 4th of July parades, um, marched in the parade as Boy Scouts. It was like America,
Yep.
as we think about old America. Um, Very fortunate to have two really good parents that took care of me. I was number three in line. I have two older sisters, and so they were both actually born during World War II. So this will tell your guess how old I am. So I was born in 1954. So uh, it was a definitely a different time. So my parents were quite a bit older by that time, so they
Hmm.
were probably tired. Um, and I actually spent a lot of time away from home. I went to summer camp, went to prep school in Connecticut, and then right to college. So growing up in that town, it was we didn't lock our doors. I had friends. We disappear all day, come home for dinner.
Right.
Like they used to say, don't come home unless it's dinner time or you're bleeding.
Right.
And it was just great. It was a blast. Um, Pretty ignorant or naive to the world. Learned a little bit here and there, but prep school kind of opened my eyes because there was different cultures that came together there. But again, even that was a very small school.
What was
Uh,
that like?
um, it was a little intense academically. It was very small. It was only 250 kids in the whole school,
Okay.
but it was a residence prep school. Um, I missed a lot of opportunities. There was actually my dorm master, Ben Morgan, was a fabulous machinist. He grew up in Worcester, Mass, which had a large tool and die industry, and his family came from there. So he was one of the guys that you may know that can basically make anything out of anything. You give him
MacGyver.
a MacGyver. You give him some raw steel, and he'll turn out a clock or something.
Oh,
In
that's
fact,
awesome.
well, in our school we had a clock tower, big clock tower, and old, and it got struck by lightning. So the gears that were metal had some of them got melted together. So he fixed it. He had to
Oh, wow.
machine gears out of raw metal. It was just incredible.
He sounds
So
like he was quite a big
he,
influence in your
he
life.
was it was a mentor, and I should have taken more advantage of it, and I didn't because you know I was kind of busy. I'm not a great student. I was looking back through my transcripts, and I think I thought I was smarter than I really was. Transcripts were less than impressive, but and I was pretty focused even at that time on flying. So really, all I really wanted to do was fly airplanes from
Nice.
the time I can remember. So kind of everything I did, read, built model airplanes. It was all about airplanes. Pretty boring for people that aren't into airplanes. It's great for those of us who are into airplanes because there's
That's
always
right.
plenty to talk about.
That's right.
Um, so I got out of prep school, went to a little college up in Maine, small town boy, small town school, small college up in Waterville, Maine. And fortunately, the airport was literally about 2.5 miles from the campus. So I had started flying in high school, and when let's say I had about I can't remember, about 40 hours, but a lot of it was it was really interesting. Instructor I had in my hometown, he was one of the World War II civilian instructors contracted by the Army Air Corps
Oh,
to do the initial training. So he had his beautiful Stearman, an old J3 Cub, a Cessna 310, and he had two little Cessna 150s that he taught in. So he was my instructor, Stan Krapinski, great guy. But Stan didn't really believe in radios very much. So
no?
going
It-
to control tower fields, yeah, not a big thing. Um, so when I got to, yeah, it's one of those things. When I got to Waterville, the instructor that they had on site there, another World War II, but he was a veteran. And in fact, John Gibbons, one of the best instructors I've ever had in my
Oh, wow.
entire career. And all he did was civilian, but he was in submarines in World War II. He was a fireman, which in the Navy, that means you're in the engine room. And he used a GI Bill to get his pilot's license and his instructor, and that's what he did. He instructed, and he was
That's
incredible,
pretty cool.
incredible.
That's
So
neat.
it was like I say, you're going to hear this many times. I was probably unconscious going through life. All I wanted to do was fly airplanes. I was focused,
You had a
and
goal.
God was obviously taking care of me because I really couldn't have done this on my own. And for all you young folks out there, if there are any young folks,
Mhm.
have faith, because as I look back, um, you can't be that lucky that many times. There's something else going on. I don't know if you've ever heard the one when you start flight training, you're issued two bags. There's the lucky bag and the experience bag. As you go on flying, the lucky bag gets emptied out as the experience bag gets filled up. But at some point in time, that lucky bag is going to be empty. So anyway, he got John started flying, and I was, I was relatively competent. He wasn't afraid I was going to kill him or anything, so I became a good student. Amazingly enough, I was also in Air Force ROTC. That was one of the
Okay.
reasons I went to Colby. They had a very small unit, and in fact, the last year that we graduated anybody, we had graduated one guy, and he went to B-52s. Um,
Wow.
so Bruce Carmichael. Don't ask me why I remember his name, but I do. Um, and so the way that school was, the academic year was, you did 2 semesters, but in January they had called it a Jan plan. So it was like a 1 month, 3 credit hour thing. So the school offered classes if you want to take a class, or if you could find a um, faculty to sponsor you, you could do a project. So I said, well,
That's pretty.
I'm going to finish my private pilot's license. And that's what I did. Of course, January in Maine, in those days, all of you are too young to remember this, but there were some big winters up there.
Yep.
But I was able to get through, and I think I finally got my private in February. So I didn't quite finish it in January, but it was very close. And I hung out at the airport so much that I ended up wrangling a job on weekends pumping gas. So
Wow.
I was in hog heaven, and I wasn't doing anything in sports or anything. So I went to the airport every weekend and hung out. If I had free time, I'd go out to the airport. The cool thing about the job was, in being a fixed base operation, their margin was really thin. So they didn't pay me in cash; they paid me in flight time, and so it was a win-win.
Yeah, I'd say.
I had that job for all 4 years going through school. And that got me to, when I graduated in 1976, that got me to about 350 hours with my commercial instrument rating. And I was probably just about to start working on my CFI, which now we have to jump back to the end of my sophomore year. So sorry to go backwards, everybody, hang in there.
Uh,
But
this
I,
is your story.
I have an excuse. Also, if I'm talking too fast, stop me.
Yep.
And all you have to do is put up your hand. I'll stop. But I was in Air Force ROTC. I was 1P, which meant I was going to be a pilot. But this was in 1974. And in fact, we had General Bob White come and talk to us in February. X-15 pilot,
Hmm.
General.
Wow.
Wow, that's awesome. And so we were in awe. And he said, gave us the old talk. Well, you guys we appreciate you, and thanks for hanging in there. And, we're going to stand by you, and blah, blah, blah. So February. In March, our detachment guys said, by the way, we're shutting the unit down at the end of this semester. So you can do whatever you want. I was like,
Oh,
what? I mean, what do you mean? He said, well, you can either just get out or you can transfer it to another school in March.
oh my gosh.
Okay, this is not that good. So actually had a couple of guys quit. I had one of my frat brothers transferred down to UPenn. Um, Another frat brother was 1 year ahead of me, so he actually kind of lucked out. They still paid his tuition, and he didn't really have to do anything. It
Hmm.
was called the Palace Option. So he ended up finishing out at Colby, and we'll talk about that here in a second, a little bit more what happened to them. So at the end of my sophomore year, I'm facing this kind of dilemma because I really don't want to transfer. I like what I'm doing, where I am. Um, I'm kind of settled in. And one of my officers there at the detachment, great guy, um, and uh, Larry Lester. He had flown. He was a FAPE in the Air Force, and the Air Force guys out there. That's a plowback instructor. So you go through, get your wings, then you go right back to an instructor. But then he went to Vietnam and flew caribous. And if anybody knows what a
Oh.
caribou did in Vietnam, they went out and landed on dirt roads and stuff out in the jungle. I mean, it was
Oh.
high threat, high threat.
Yeah, I'd
Great
say.
guy, great guy. So he was my sponsor for that Jan plan. So at the end of my sophomore year, he said, "Look, if there's no guarantees right now because Vietnam was winding down. This was 1974. You could transfer to another school, but RTC guys, you're kind of bottom of the barrel there. Even the academy guys weren't getting flying slots. So it's like, see if the Marine Corps or the Navy are hiring." Okay. So I went down to the Navy and they said, "Heck yeah, son, sign right here." I went, fine. I went, I do. What did I just do? They said, "You enlisted in the Navy as an inactive E5 reservist." And I went,
Wow.
"What is that?" So, yeah. So that's interesting enough. That was my pay entry base date. So I was officially in the Navy as an inactive reservist at the rank of E5. And I didn't know anything else. So no commitment, no uniforms, no drill. The um, recruiter would come up and check on you, see how you're doing. Occasionally they come up with airplanes, give you airplane rides, trying to keep you motivated. But the trick with that program was it was called Aviation Reserve Officer Candidate. You were
Okay.
basically hired by the Navy as a reserve officer for aviation. That was your job, which was fine for me. Between your junior and senior year, you went to Pensacola for 60 days active duty training, which you're getting yelled at by DIs. If you ever saw Officer and Gentleman, it was that,
Mhm.
but worse. And it was a fabulous summer. I loved every minute of it. I was so motivated when I came out of there. I was in great shape. And it's like I say, it was worse. I remember flying down there on an Eastern DC-9 into Pensacola. Now I've been living up in Maine, and
Right.
we had ice on our ponds up there in May. So this is June, and I'm flying to Pensacola in June. And I get off the airplane. I remember this distinctly because they didn't have jetways at the time. The airport was very small, so the DC-9 had air stairs. And I walked out of the airplane into this wall of humidity, not having really felt anything like that before.
Yep.
And it's night and it's steamy, and there's a bunch of us all gathering up. We get on the bus and we go down the main side and we get into our bunks, and it's really weird. So there's four man rooms, and they get us up in the morning, and we have to start in processing. So they're just trying to figure out who we are. The candidate officers come and start yelling, screaming. Um, it gets kind of weird pretty quick. But they have to get you organized. So we go out that day, get all your hair shaved off, just like you've seen in the movies. You get issued uniforms, marching around, and it is freaking hot. And you get a silver painted helmet liner with a number on it. So you didn't have a name; it was just the number on your chrome dome. So
That's where
so
that comes from.
what's the number on the chrome dome? Crazy. And so in that class that summer, the Navy had not kind of cut back yet. So again, this is the end. Vietnam is all winding down, but naval
Yeah.
aviation hadn't quite gotten the word yet. So in that class between the AVROCs and the AOCs, there were about 90 of us,
Oh,
all
wow.
like lunatics. So um, it did get pared down pretty quickly. In my four-man room, by the end of the week, there were two of us left.
Oh,
Uh,
goodness.
one kid NPQ that's not physically qualified, And the other kid, I remember his name too, Lance, real nice kid from Dayton, Ohio. He missed his girlfriend. Really? Well, anyway, so so off we go. So the rest of the summer was marching. We got to shoot our rifles. After the first week, and we went through the NAMI physical. Now you're in your battalion, and now it's getting serious because now we're going to class. We're marching. We're drilling. We're PTing, and it's. I think Reveille was at. What was Reveille? I think Reveille was at 5, and it was lights out at 10, and you were going the entire day, and it was a fabulous experience. The drill instructors were incredibly professional,
Well,
uh, masters at psychology, how to get the most out of you. And the way they do that, and you know this, you got two Marines, and they probably told you about boot camp. They bust you down to nothing so they
yep.
can build you back up the way you needed it. And it was an incredible transformation. And men, they could humiliate you like you've never seen before. And I remember one class, their drill instructor, I don't know if they deserved it or not. It was just part of the thing. But I saw them as a mob, and their hats are on sideways, and their shirts are on tucked, and they're not, they're just shuffling, and the drill instructor's yelling at them the whole time, just humiliating them and dressing them down. But that was part of it. My battalion, we had our rifle burial. I don't know if they did that in your son's boot camps, but
I didn't hear about that one. So what's that
well,
about?
we had our M14s,
Hmm.
and they're old, and you could never get all the rust off of it. So the drill instructor would find whoever was going to be that day, and he would say, "This rifle is filthy. So look at this. This rifle is dead. We must bury this rifle and give it a good burial." So you dig a hole in the lawn in front of the battalion and bury the rifle, and we have a little, prayer service over it. And of course, then you'd have to dig it back up and clean it.
I was going to say that was probably a mess and a half.
It was hysterical. Looking back now, and then at the time, and I don't I don't know if I had my sense of humor the whole time, but I just remember sometimes it was like, this is really cool. This is just really cool. Running the obstacle course there in that sugar sand down there in Pensacola
Hmm.
Beach
Yep.
near the Oak Club is when it was. It was brutal. Um, but then we got to do cool things like water survival and go out to Whiting or go out to Softly Field. We got rides in T-34s at Softly. So it's just really cool. And I really loved all of it. So at the end of that 60 days, I went back to school, and there was no drill commitment. You're not getting paid. You got paid while you were there because I was active duty. But I
Right.
finished school. So in 1976 in June, I called them up Pensacola and said, I graduated. And they said, hey, great, congratulations. We'll see you in Pensacola in November. I was like, okay, well, so things are starting to slow down. So the
Yeah.
class of 90 in 1975, when I went back in November, there were 10 of us, and that was it. And it was
Goodness.
really interesting time. The good thing about going back is the drill instructors knew that we were back. So they weren't trying to weed us out. They knew we were committed. So it was a little more informal. And we just went to class, did our work, and to get ready to do the candidate officer. 2 weeks as candidate officer, we actually ran the battalion, got the
Oh,
new guys in, you marched them, drilled them, sent them for review, and then you finally got commissioned. So
did you have them bury their rifle?
no, we didn't do that. We didn't. Probably wanted to, but we didn't do that. That was up really to the drill instructors. What we were doing we would make sure that they knew how to do their lockers. We'd march them to back and forth to class, just kind of take care of them and harass them a little bit, but we could never achieve the level of drill instructor. They were the pros, and
Yes.
we were 90-day wonders. So we never went into that. So that was it. So um, totally motivated. In fact, I've got one of my visual aids here. Here's me and my dad. That's Pensacola in 1970. Well, it's actually January 77 is when I got my commission. And he had been in
Wow.
the Army in World War II. His pretty interesting story too. Um, he had a little bit, so I'll jump to him since you just showed him. Um, he had a little bit of college when the war broke out. So he enlisted, and for a while he was a drill instructor down in Miami. He got picked up for
Okay.
OCS, went to officer candidate school, got commissioned, and this was in 43, I think late 43. He got sent to Camp Campbell in those days. If we have any Army guys out there, it's Fort Campbell now, but in those days it was
Yeah.
Camp Campbell. And they were standing up the 20th Armored Division from scratch. So it was a brand new armored division. Well, they didn't get over to Europe until about January 1945. It took that long to get them equipped, trained. So when they got to Le Havre in January 1945, all the big stuff really had already happened. The Bulge was over, the Hurtgen was done. We were starting to bunch up against the Rhine River. So they went screaming across France, got attached to Patton's Third, and finally, when they got across the Rhine, they went into Bavaria, South Germany. Saw a little bit of action, not too much. And then when the war finished, they yanked that division right out because they were basically fresh. It all put
Okay.
together. Sent them directly to Fort Irwin, California, to work up for Japan. So for years, he talked about the bombs going off and how they were relieved when the bombs went off. And you've read probably stuff about that. But I never wondered until later, until after he passed, and he passed in actually 1978, right after I
Okay.
got flight training. Yeah, so there was a lot I didn't really get to talk to him about, but there's a really good online website that I found, the operation for Japan, Operation Downfall, and I found where the 20th Armored Division was supposed to be, and they were the first reserve afloat for Tokyo Bay. So,
Oh,
so as the war kept going, there's probably a pretty good chance I wouldn't have been born, is the way
yeah.
I worked that out. And so, anyways, that was his story. He came back from the war and went back to civilian life and raised the kids and ended up running a print shop. He was actually a graphic artist.
Oh, okay.
It's kind
Well,
of where I
I have to say that photo, that's actually a wonderful photo. I mean, both of you in, your dress and really looking sharp. So, and we kind of know how that is because, when our middle had graduated boot, of course we were there for that
yeah,
graduation and kind of the
it's pretty
same thing.
wild, isn't
Yeah,
it?
but neither myself or my husband are military, so of course, we didn't have where, two generations side by side of military, but it's really an interesting photo. And we did have a couple who said, a great photo. We have rim fires out there, and he did say the same, great photo. Um, and of course, Killian had to laugh because you said visual aid.
Well, it started me thinking about, because like I said, like I told you, Carolee, I'm a Cold War guy. And
Hmm.
I only got shot at once, and I really didn't like it very much. And
I don't know that there's anybody who really did like it.
well, we'll get to that part of the story eventually, but uh, it was a different time, and and it'll lead in. So I got commissioned in 1977 out in Pensacola. Went out right out to Whiting Field, um, and again, you can't be this lucky this many times without somebody guiding you. Um, the Navy was using T-34Bs, which is basically a like a Bonanza. It's got a 6-cylinder reciprocating engine. They were trading those out to get the T-34C, which is actually a turboprop. Very cool airplane. But the Beach test pilot had ripped an aileron off, test flying it, and didn't get out. So they put that program on hold. In the meantime, they still had to train us. So they used the advanced prop, or the intermediate prop trainer, which was a T-28 Trojan. And if any of your folks out there know what that is, it was built by North American, a 1,820 cubic inch 9-cylinder radial engine on the front,
Wow.
spitting oil everywhere, and big airplane. and shaking and rattling, noisy, beat to death, and just one of the coolest airplanes I've ever flown. And having 350 hours was very helpful because at least I understood having that ever be your first airplane that you ever stepped in, foot in, would have been pretty intimidating.
Right.
And with that, the instructors, I think, knew that they had to take a little bit extra care because it would be very easy for people to kill themselves in that thing.
Yeah.
In
Yeah.
fact, when I got out to Whiting in January '77, I think I was there 3 days, and I went to a memorial service. So it
Oh,
was like an instructor and student didn't get out. So it was like, uh, this is okay. You could die doing this. I got it. Okay.
yeah. Yeah. Take note.
But had a blast doing it. It was a great airplane. I was very fortunate. I had a great instructor. And, one of those things is when you get in the airplane, you kind of know if the guy knows what he's doing. And
Right.
since I had flown airplanes before, the instructor was, okay, this guy's not going to try to kill me right away. It was only until, I can't remember, it was a little bit later when we were doing stall recoveries that I had torque rolled the airplane that scared the crap out of myself. And he was pretty cool because he was laughing. He thought it was pretty fun. I was laughing. So anyway,
That
that
would
goes.
scare me.
It was wild. I had never flown an airplane power enough to torque roll, and it's really what that means is I was doing a stall recovery, put in too much power too quickly, and the torque of the airplane overpowered the aerodynamic controls. So I had full deflection on the aerodynamic controls, but the airplane was still going the opposite direction.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's like, oh, okay, so there's that.
Let's not do that again.
Let's not do that again. And I never did actually. I learned. I'm
See,
teachable.
you are very teachable.
So anyway, all right. So I went through Whiting pretty quickly, and then went out to Beeville when they were flying T2s and A4s, and so I'm going to jets, and I'm just
Oh,
unconscious. It's like incredible. The T2 is a fun little airplane, but the A4 was a real challenge because it was actually an attack airplane that had been turned into a trainer. The
oh,
T2 was
okay.
built as a trainer, so it was straight wing, pretty forgiving, not a lot of power, but that straight wing made it a very forgiving airplane. The A4 was a challenge. It was designed by Ed Heinemann at Douglas basically it was a suicide nuke bomber.
Oh,
It was designed and built in the '50s when the bombs were really big, and that's why the gear is so tall on it. One reason is to fit the bomb underneath, and they had cute little things when they had the airplane. There was like they had little blast curtains, because you're going to drop your nuke, right, and it's going to go off, so you need to have the blast. It was stupid. We didn't know what we were doing, but great little airplane, incredibly nimble. And in fact, it was so nimble, it was hard to. You really couldn't get it trimmed up. It would never really
hmm.
sit there by itself. It was always a hands-on airplane.
So it didn't
So
have like autopilot or anything like that?
no autopilot, no stabog. It was basically just instruments and a jet engine and controls. It was
But
it was
that's one of the best ways to learn, though, your instrumentation, really,
yeah.
if you think about
Well,
it.
flying the
Because,
airplane, it was you had to fly the airplane the entire time. There was really no breaks.
yeah.
And of course, it's a trainer, so that was a good thing. You wanted that.
Mhm.
It was actually a very good instrument airplane because of the instrumentation. It was a bad instrument airplane because it was not stable at all.
Yeah.
If I could never get the thing trimmed up for more than about maybe 10 seconds, and it would
Oh,
be
wow.
off. And it's what we call divergent. So if it started wandering, it would just get worse
Hmm.
until it rolled over. Great airplane though. So the interesting thing about, hope there's no Air Force guys out there if there is, but the
There's,
culmination.
I'm sure there is somewhere.
You talk to the Air Force guys who are in training, and the culmination of their training is four-plane formation in T-38s, which is really cool. Now I'm not dissing the T-38, great airplane, but that's the culmination of your training. In
Wow.
the Navy, when we went to jets, four-plane formation was what you had to do just to do the rest of the stuff.
Hmm.
So you went through FAM, some instruments, and then you started flying two-plane formation, and then you had to go to four-plane formation because even in T2s, you had to do the four-plane formation, but your challenges in T2s were air-to-air gunnery with live 50 caliber pods in those
Wow.
days.
Wow.
Banners. So if anybody knows anything about a squirrel cage gunnery pattern, you've got an airplane towing a banner with a big orange circle on it, and it's a squirrel cage. So you're diving, shooting, recovering, diving, shooting, recovering. There's 4 airplanes doing this all continuously through the pattern, shooting 50 caliber rounds. Now
Wow.
they weren't high explosive incendiary. We're not stupid,
Just
but
crazy.
it was wild. So you went out to the gunnery range and came back from the gunnery range in four-plane formation. Then what happens after that? You got to go to the boat. You have to caracal. You have
Oh,
to get your touch and
yeah.
goes and 6-day traps to caracal. So you go out to the boat in four-plane formation, and depending, you probably wouldn't go back in four-plane formation because it would kind of fall apart once you got landing and hot pit and hot seat airplanes and students. Um, so four-plane formation was a basic function. Then you go to A4s, and you're doing it all again. So it's basic flying, instruments. Um, then you start doing air to ground stuff. So it's and air to air. We do ACM. You do low level navigation. You do ground attack where you're strafing with 20 millimeter, shooting 2.75 inch rockets, and dropping practice bombs.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. And then
And
what do
you're
you do?
loving the whole thing the whole time, aren't you?
It was so cool. And then what do? You got to go to the boat because you have to caracal at the boat daytime. So it's 6-day traps, 2 touch and goes and 6-day traps. And once you've done all that, then you get your wings and off you go to your fleet.
Did you have to qual at night too for the carrier?
No, they kept
No.
the night qual was when you got to your fleet airplane. And
Okay.
nights are, if you've talked to any Navy guys, I don't know if you've talked to many Navy guys. I think I've come to a general consensus is daytime when the weather's pretty good is okay, or even just a blast. It's fun. Nighttime when the moon, if you got a full moon and a steady deck, it's okay. That's about as good as it gets, and it can go
Okay.
way downhill from there. And in fact, that sets me up because when I got my wings, I went to uh, people out of Beeville weren't getting fighters, and actually it was kind of a transition because the F4s were still flying, and not to diss the F4, it was a great airplane, but it was getting to the end of its life. So I didn't want to go to a dying airplane. Nobody was getting F-14s, so the next choices were the attack airplanes. So it was A6s and A7s, and I just chose the A6 at Virginia Beach because it was closer to home. That was the only reason.
So you
Um,
got to choose.
A6 didn't have a gun, but it carried a lot of bombs. Yeah, you got to choose. You put in your preference, and it was whatever the needs of the Navy. Um, so I went to A6s, and it was pretty interesting with the way they did it in those days. You had to go to another A4 unit first to get your instrument card because you were a designated naval aviator, but you didn't have your instrument qual yet, even though you'd done
Oh.
plenty of flying. It was kind of weird.
Hmm.
So you did, I can't remember what it was, 6 or 10 hops in an A4 under the bag in the back, and then you finally got your instrument card. So you were a basic instrument qual. And what you'll hear from other naval aviators is it's interesting, and I heard this early on. To be a good carrier pilot, you have to be a really excellent instrument pilot because even in the daytime, you're going to spend a lot of time on instruments. The day VFR pattern at the boat is basically an instrument pattern. It's
Oh.
precision flying. 600 feet in the pattern, 475 feet, 90 degrees of turn, 375 feet rolling into the groove. If you're 350 feet, you're low. If you're 400 feet, you're high. That type of stuff. So being able to assimilate that instrument flying into visual, meld it all together is kind of what sets the carrier guys apart a little bit. Um, so um,
Killian says basically you were the original Maverick.
yeah, no, he had better hair. Um,
I don't know. Your hair is pretty darn good, I have to say.
um, The A6 was an interesting airplane. I didn't know what I was getting into. Funny enough, the first squadron, I still have several friends from that squadron that I talk to regularly. It's kind of weird.
Nice.
Um, at the A6 itself, and people know what it is, it's a kind of big, ugly bomber. They said it was, the fat end is on the front. That's why it couldn't go very fast. Um, it was built by Grumman as a all-weather attack bomber. So the reason it had a huge nose was the radar. So it was also designed in the late 50s when the technology just wasn't there. It had a
Yeah.
huge, very powerful radar that was an incredible terrain mapping radar and a very good bombing radar if the bombardier navigator knew how to run it. So what we used to say is if you had a good bombardier navigator, you could hit some pretty good targets. If he wasn't that good with the system, you weren't going to hit a county. It was it was it was pretty amazing. And I saw that, and part of it, you could even have a good bombardier navigator, but if the system wasn't cooperating, there were many bombs that we dropped. We never knew where they went. Um,
Oh,
it was kind of entertaining. Um, the bombardier navigator was interesting because he had this boot that he had to look into for the radar scope, and we
hmm,
also had video um, FLIR pods on those airplanes. So he had two screens he had to look at in the boot, so the outside light wouldn't contaminate his view. And there were 14 stacked knobs down by his right knee that he had to use by feel to adjust
oh,
everything. So some of it was automatic, a lot of it was manual. And like I said, if you had a good guy, he was worth his weight in gold. If you had a bombardier navigator that wasn't that good, he wasn't worth 200 pounds of gas. So really
okay.
interesting thing. Great squadron. Had a good skipper. Had a great skipper, and had a not so good skipper. Mostly it was the guys, the JOs, and we had some great department heads too that kept things running. It was a great experience. That was on the let me see, visual aid.
Visual aids are good.
All right, there's Independence CV
There,
62, which is
there you
that's Razor Blades now, but it was a Forstall class, not a not my favorite class of boat. It was one of the first super carriers built, Forstall class. Indy was the last of the class. The deck was actually not very useful. It wasn't very big for that size of ship. Um, we always seemed to have jet fuel in the water. I'm not sure why that was true. So at times
go. A leak?
it would get somehow into the freshwater evaps, into the freshwater system
Wow.
because we made our own fresh water, and some of the JP5 would get in there, and so there were times when we couldn't use the fresh water, so there were no showers, and we were on canned juice, sterilized milk,
And
and we
how
didn't.
long were you out there for?
The Navy, any Navy guys out there? You
Mm,
know,
I don't know if we have any out there at the moment.
all right. Navy, they always say, "Oh, well, your cruises are 6 months." Not
Cruises.
entirely true, because what they don't tell you about is the workups. So if anybody ever says, "Oh yeah, the oh I know all about those Navy guys. They're 6 month cruises." Well, you ask them, "Oh yeah, well, how long are the workups?" And they'll look at you with a blank stare because they don't know what they are. The workups are the 3 to 4 months you spend at sea before you go on cruise for 6 months. And they
Get you
tell you,
used to it,
well,
basically.
and it's really annoying because it's to the ship and you go out for a couple, 3 weeks, then you come back to shore for a couple, 3, 4 weeks. Then you go back to the ship for 3 or 4 weeks, then you come back. So what you're doing is now you're split. So you're moving all your trash to the boat, then you're moving all your trash back. And I was in the maintenance department, uh, really almost my whole time there, as well as being an LSO. And the shops have to move a lot of their stuff, all their
Yeah.
tools and their gear, their crap. So it's all these metal cruise boxes, and you load it on a stake truck, take it to the boat, hump it onto the elevator, and then put it out to the things. And you have to do that like 3 or 4 times. It becomes kind of annoying. However, that's just what we did. when you went on cruise, it was kind of a relief because you knew you weren't going to have to move anything for at least 6 months, right? So, so that,
That makes sense. Yeah.
that it's just the way they do it, and it's kind of you have to do it because as you start the workup cycle, that is your training cycle, not only for the air wing but also for the ship's company, because you've got 2,500, 3,000 ships company. A lot of them are new. They have to figure out what their jobs are, and one of their more important jobs is damage control.
Right.
So they're assigned to damage control teams, and that's the difference between saving a ship and a ship sinking is your damage control. Um, and we of course learned that the hard way in World War II. The Japanese lost all their carriers before they figured it out.
Yeah.
But so uh, so when I went on cruise, the A6, well, actually even before that, because I was talking about CQ, um, went through A6 flying. It was great. Had a blast time. Um, am I supposed to read this? Yes.
Oh, I was going to read that. It's also not including extensions out to sea that seem to happen all the time for the sake of OPSEC.
That's correct. Well, and it's funny you mentioned that, Killian, because um, my first cruise was basically a love boat cruise. We were on time. The second cruise was an IO cruise. We were extended 3 weeks. The third cruise was on the Coral Sea in the Gulf of Sidra for El Dorado Canyon, and we were extended for that too. So 3 cruises, 2 extensions, and kind of could see the writing on the wall there. Um, so we'll get to that in a second. But the main thing I wanted to get, because we were talking about nights of the boat.
Yes.
Um, so A6 training went great. Had a lot of fun. Dropping bombs, low levels. It was really cool. It gets the carrier to the boat. Before you do that, you go out for field carrier landing practice. And at Oceana, it was out at Fentress. And you just land do like 8 to 10 landings at the field. It was all graded by the LSO, and you kind of get used to doing it at night. Daytime was pretty easy. Now we're doing this at night. So now you're at 3 o'clock in the morning out at Fentress landing, because everybody had to do it. So everybody had their slots. So we finally go out to the boat. So the bombardier I'm teamed up with is Forrest Penny. Don't ask me why I remember his name. He was an Air Force navigator from FB-111s. So if any of you guys know about FB-111s, those are the fighter bombers. So those were the guys that would go in there on autopilot at 500 feet at 600 knots at night.
Oh, goodness.
It's insane.
And that's just 500 feet just to get under the radar, or?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yep. Okay.
Level ingress, 600 knots. You got it. And you could not scare him. He was not scarable. So he was a great guy to be with. Did a great job. He was actually very good with the system. So off we go to the boat. So we do our day call. So you get called in the daytime, and it's 2 touch and goes and actually 10 traps in the daytime. And it was not too bad. Now it's time to go at night. Night call was 6 night traps. And we didn't even do touch and goes in those days. I think they do now. Well, we've got the CVT-16. It's the Lexington. That's a World War II carrier. It's got an angled deck on it now, but it's a really small deck. It's the landing area is about 550 feet long. The wires, there's 4 wires spaced 25 feet. The first wire that you can catch is, I think it was 90 feet from the round down, from the back end of the boat. So you've got to put your airplane in that spot. Old gear, very stiff. So catching it is like being in a car wreck. There's no smooth to it or anything. Well, anyway, so we're okay with that. It's a full moon off of Pensacola in December. The weather was perfect. The sky was clear. The BRC, base recovery course, is 360. So what does that mean? That means you're steaming north. So you've got this horizon, which is Pensacola. The whole Gulf Coast is right there. The full moon. You can see the water. The ship's lit up. And you're going, this night stuff's not too bad. I could probably do this. Well, I qualified. So now it's January. I've got about 6 hops left in this A6 squadron. The weather's really, really bad. So the hops I have left to do are the low level night navigation hops. So it's night low levels out in the mountains, in the Appalachians, going up
Oh,
and over ridge. Oh yeah. Yeah, this is serious stuff. So
wow.
A6 was a great airplane for it, and that's what it was built for. But the weather was really kind of crummy, and they weren't idiots. They're not going to send you out if it's snowing or icing or anything like that. They said, Jim, the weather's going to be pretty bad. So what we're going to do is we're not going to get these hops out. We're going to send you down to your squadron, and they're off of Gitmo right now. You know where Gitmo is, right?
Hmm.
Guantanamo. Okay,
Yep.
good. So I went, oh, okay. Oh, so what do I do? Just go down there. You're going to fly with them and everything. And then when you come back, the weather will be better. We'll finish up. Okay. So I get on my C9 to Gitmo, helo out to the boat on the Independence now, and wandering around. I have no idea where I am, what I'm doing. Finally find the ready room. Oh, here's the new guy. So we have, you know how they say hello to the new guy, right? Have you ever heard?
No. In the Navy? Absolutely not. I don't know.
You may have heard. Well, if you haven't heard it, you will, and some of your listeners probably do. But it'll be, hey, this is Jim. Well, hell, I can't say his last name, but say hello to the new guy. Hello, asshole. Say hello to the asshole. Hello, new guy. So anyway, they get that out of the way. So then the fight's on to try to figure out a call sign. All right. So I fly a little bit in the daytime, and I'm not scaring anybody. It's actually kind of cool to be in an actual, no kidding. I'm in a fleet airplane and a bomber. Um, and they teamed me up with this freaking incredible dude, Dick Tangeman. Um, the reason he was incredible, one, he was a great bombardier navigator, super dude. But he started his Navy career in naval aviation as the backseater in an RA-5 Vigilante. Anybody know what that is? The Vigi,
Mm-mm.
built
I
by
don't
North
think I've heard of
American. It was
huh.
supposed to be a supersonic nuke bomber, and it was designed in the late 50s. Really interesting. The delivery was the bomb bay was in between the engines, and they were going to eject the bomb out of the back of the airplane between the engines because the airplane was going to be doing 1.6 Mach or something for the
Oh,
delivery. Well, it didn't work because the slipstream carried the bomb with it. It's not
no, just
great
bad
idea.
things.
Uh,
Right. Bad things happen there.
not good. So what they turned it into a reconnaissance airplane. So they took the Bombay out. They put a recon package in there. They had I think it was radar and photo recon, and with nothing hanging on it, it was blisteringly fast. Great airplane. Not so good for the boat. It was huge and fast. And in fact, if the auto throttles didn't work on it, that was actually considered an emergency procedure. Um, and the wave off window for that airplane was basically the start. 3/4 of a mile behind the ship. If the guy was not set up out there, you just kind of waved him off because it was coming aboard so fast. He really didn't have time to correct anything, make any
Yeah.
corrections. No, that's what I hear. I never waved him, so I don't know. I'm taking it on hearsay. But the thing about Dick was he was in the back seat of their RA-5 when they got hit, and he came out of the Hanoi Hilton 6.5 years later. 6.5 years in the Hanoi Hilton.
Wow.
So you could tell it was hard on him. Great guy, great attitude, great bombardier. And I think actually he's still teaching down in Central Florida right now, but just a super dude. So here's this ensign, and I don't know squat, right? I really have no idea what I'm doing. And I'm under Dick's wing, uh, and he's shepherding me around. Well, now it's time for my first night launch. So we go up, and I can't remember. I can't remember if it was a bomber or a tanker. I want to say it was actually a tanker. And the A6 had a ram air turbine. It was an emergency electrical generator that was in the left ring root. That you could pull a handle in the cockpit and would pop up this little generator into the wind, and it would give you, it would light up the cockpit, allow you to fly the airplane and get back to the boat. It was very good bearings and very light, so any wind would start turning those blades. So that night, Was not a night I'd ever seen on the boat before. It was black. There was no horizon. There was no stars. You couldn't see the water. It was black. So it gets better. Okay. The airplane is spotted on Cat 4. So in an aircraft carrier, there's two bobcats. There are 1 and 2. Then you go to the waist, there are 3 and 4. It's the cat track that runs right along the edge of the boat. So
Okay.
I'm on the left side of the airplane. As I climb up the ladder, the edge of the boat is literally about 4 feet, 3 or 4 feet away from where I'm standing into the catwalk. Beyond the catwalk, it's all black.
Oh, wow.
So I'm thinking, this is really dark. So at the time, the plane captains would put out that ram air turbine to do their pre-flight. Well, I wasn't really cognizant of that fact because it's so dark. I'm feeling my way along the turtle back of the airplane because the floodlights on the island are shining and creating a shadow on that side of the
Okay.
airplane. So it's kind of disorienting. And then there's the rat, which I find with my hand. There's about 30 knots of wind over the deck, and that thing is humming. So my hand went into the rat. I was very lucky that I didn't lose any digits, but it cut me right across my knuckles. No stitches, but it
Wow.
would bash the crap out of my hand.
Mm-hmm.
I finally said, "Hey, Dick, I just hurt my hand." And he goes, "Oh, crap." Well, actually, later, I figured out it was a brilliant move because it got me out of that night launch. Maybe a little extreme, but it didn't have to go. And
Right.
that was the end of my night experience on the Independence at that time. Um, However, that incident got me my call sign. So when I got back to the regular, of course, you take your ribbing, and there were 3 choices: rat, obviously, because it was a rat; blades, kind of weird; or fingers. Well, we already had a rat, so we couldn't be that. Blades was kind of dumb, so fingers stuck. That was my call sign, and that's how I got
And
that. So
here it
that's
is.
story.
Wow. Yeah, because I wondered about that. Yes.
I know.
I wasn't sure if it was like, jazz hands or
It was stupid ensign tricks. And it's funny because as we were talking about that, and I had another discussion. There's another fingers in the Navy, and I don't know. Do you know the name Jack Inch?
I do not. Mm-mm.
Jack Inch was an F4 Rio in World War II in Vietnam, and they got shot down. And he had taken shrapnel in his, I think it was his left hand, and actually ended up losing the thumb.
Oh,
Um, he spent a while in the Hanoi Hilton too, and his call sign was Fingers. And I actually had met him several times. I had forgotten that until we had the discussion. And I was like, "There's another Fingers. I know that." And it was Jack Inch. I met him when I was first met him when I was an instructor out at VFA 125 in Lemoore, when he was an admiral, I think, by that time. So that's when I let Fingers. So that was the end of my introduction to VA 176. I didn't do any more night launches on that episode. So I finished up VA 17 or VA 42, the RAG, got called in the A6, then went to my squadron during workups. And that's where I was introduced to workups. So the first thing that happened when I got back to the squadron was a memorial service.
ah,
We had a crew that, again, this is kind of stupid, but we had this. We carried saltwater activated flares that you drop in the water and they activate. So it's light flare light at night, and we were bombing single light flares at night, which is stupid because on a black background, a single light source, you have no depth perception, and we never found a thing. We never found any wreckage, nothing. They just flew into the water and disappeared. So after that, we dropped 2 flares at night. So at least you had, or 3, so you'd have a pattern. But that was the first thing I did when I got to my fleet squadron
okay.
memorial. So you detect a trend yet?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Just a little
yeah.
bit.
Fortunately, when I was at Beeville, we didn't kill anybody. We came real close several times. Um, we had a T2 that went into the trees at night on a visual illusion. Fortunately, both of those guys get out. And then we had a midair right over the field, which was very interesting. And
Oh.
everybody got out of that one.
Oh,
Uh,
that's good.
so that's good. So my A6 squadron, we lost that crew right away. We go through workups, go on cruise, and that was, when I said before, that was our love boat cruise. Um, so what that means is when you leave, you have a schedule of port visits and everything, and it worked. We went to all our ports. We were on time. Some of the guys had their wives come over and meet them. Um,
Wow.
we got like a week leave, 7 days leave. Get on the train, go through Europe or whatever it was. It was awesome. Um, and that was we left in June, so we got pretty experienced. Had a lot of exercises. It wasn't all great, uh, but it was like this is kind of fun. You out fly for a couple of weeks. You go into a nice port. Of course, everybody goes to Naples, but we went to Palma de Mallorca. We went to Palermo, Athens, Haifa. Haifa was awesome on that cruise. It was absolutely incredible. It was before the Intifada really got started, and it was just beautiful. The people were wonderful. The food was wonderful. Everybody was joyous to have Americans there. It was fantastic. Um, People went to the Dead Sea, floated in the Dead Sea, went to Jerusalem and Bethlehem. It was just a fabulous port visit. Um, and everything went on schedule. And we got home on time, which was unusual. The only bad thing on that cruise was, like I say, you're going to lose somebody. I happened to be standing on the platform for that one. And it was actually the first time that I thought I was probably going to die. It was a night, dark night, no horizon, little pitch and deck. And it was actually Buck. What was his last name? I just forgot his name. Butch Franklin was his Rio. It was VF 102. I'm sorry, VF 33, and he over controlled a high. So as you're coming into a carrier landing, all those landings are graded, and the
Okay.
controlling LSO is watching you the entire time to make sure that you're doing what you're supposed to do. As an LSO, you basically have two calls that you can give the guy. If he's not responding, you wave him off. And most of the calls that you're going to give are maybe a lineup call. The other calls mainly are the power calls. So if the guy starts getting a little slow or a little low, you'll give him the advisory call, which is you're a little low or a little power. If he doesn't respond, you then give him a command call, which is power. If he doesn't respond, then you wave him off, because obviously what you're saying he's not getting and he's not doing. All right.
Right.
So this is a dark night. Buck, amazingly enough, was student of the year coming out of the F4 RAG. He was a great pilot. The F4, great airplane, and actually at the boat it was really good, unless you get behind it. Some airplanes are okay if you get behind because you're slow enough, you have enough time to correct. The F4 was not one of those airplanes. Came aboard at about 145 knots, which means you have time for about 2 corrections. If the second correction doesn't work, hopefully your trajectory is up, because if it's down, it's not going to end well. And that's what happened to Buck. He over controlled a little high in the middle, started coming down. The F4 had this interesting, it was called boundary layer control. It was actually bleed air that was put from the leading edge to energize the airflow. If you took too much power off, you lost that bleed air and you directly basically killed lift on the airplane. So the airplane was coming down no matter what you did. Even with full power, it's going to take a few seconds for the power to kick in, for the BLC to recover. And in the meantime, your trajectory is down. It's going to take another couple of seconds for the afterburners to light. So the situation on the platform was interesting. East Coast platforms where the LSOs stand on the back end of the boat are actually recessed below the flight deck, which is probably what saved our lives, actually. It's recessed about 3 feet below the flight deck. So as you're standing there on the platform, the flight deck actually hits you about your hips.
Oh,
Which,
okay.
yeah, it's kind of weird. It's what the East Coast is. The West Coast is what we call flush deck, so you can actually walk out onto the flight deck. I'm not sure why the two fleets, different navies. There's the West Coast Navy and the East Coast Navy, right?
I know. I think that's really true of a lot of different branches, actually.
Probably. And it's really what I found is the farther away you get from DC, the better it gets. It's, I mean, you ever, you ever talk?
I, I go wherever you take me.
Well, okay. So anyway, on the platform, I don't know how people know about this, but as you're standing on the platform, the guy farthest back is the controlling LSO. When a airplane comes, what we call on the ball or is in final approach about 3/4 of a mile, he basically is locked onto the airplane. That all you do is you lock on that airplane and you're paying attention to him. The backup LSO is behind him, and he's making sure that the deck is actually clear, that the gear is set, we have a clear deck. Right next to the controlling LSO is where I was standing, right next to Benny Suggs. Benny was he was actually the CAG LSO for the air wing. He was the controlling LSO that night. I'm standing next to him because I'm writing. So as I said, every pass on the boat is recorded with a grade and a wire. And you grade things like how the guy did. Too much power, not enough power, left or right, high, low, settle. There's lots of grades that we assign to the pass, and then record the wire. So next to me is a phone talker. So he's on sound powered phones to the arresting gear guys, to the tower, to flight deck, making sure that the deck is actually clear, that the arresting gear is set for the type of airplane that's in the groove. So when the guy shows up on the ball on his approach, he would call something like, let me see, well, let me use F-18s because that's what I know. It'd be Wildcat 101, Hornet Ball 35. So they know it's a Hornet and they know its fuel state. So they know how much airplane weighs. They can set the arresting gear for that type airplane. So the phone talker's confirming that. Everything is set. So he'll say gear set. We have a light at the back end of the boat that's either red or green. So if it's red, as they're resetting things or getting clear, it'll be foul deck, foul deck. Once the deck goes clear, you get a green light and the phone talker says clear deck, and
And here they
phone
come.
talker phone talker's responsibility is to monitor that light. If it goes red, you immediately say foul deck. The controlling LSO probably doesn't see it because he's locked on the airplane. He'll wave the airplane off. So here we are back to Buck. He's got a pass. It starts out pretty good as I remember it, but I'm actually writing the previous pass. So I'm heads down in the book writing. The next thing I hear is Benny saying, power, power, burner, 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 which as he's starting to yell at, I look up and all I see is the belly of an F4 coming right at us. And
Oh
the
gosh.
drop lights on an aircraft carrier, like approach lights on a runway, they are vertical lights that are red that line up with the center line on the landing area. So I see the belly of an F4 lit up red from the drop lights. What was worse was the burner plumes from the afterburner disappearing below the deck. So
Oh,
I knew that they were going to hit. Well, one of the things about the LSO platform is you're only supposed to have, two LSOs, a writer, phone talker, and maybe an observer. But that was not true that night. The LSO platform was packed full of people.
what?
Yeah. So,
What
rules.
made that night so special that everybody was on it?
I think it was because it was dark and people were just interested to see what it looked like from the platform. So when he's coming at us, we have a net that we can bail out into. There are so many people on the platform. Benny and I never made it to the net. We just ducked down underneath the control panel. When the airplane hit, it was like anybody that's near a crash. It's not like the movies. It doesn't sound like that. It's more just like a bang. And then there's pieces of the airplane flying over us. It was the heat from the fireball that made me think we were going to die.
Yeah.
So all that stuff is going over the platform. There's shrapnel bouncing around everywhere. We somehow didn't get touched. To this day, I don't know how that happened because I felt sure we were dead.
Well,
Uh,
you're very
as,
fortunate
as we
there.
stood up, we looked at each other. It's like, "Are you okay? Are you okay? Are you okay? Okay, we're okay." Fuck, what just happened? And I
Right.
remember looking up the flight deck, and there's smoke and the fuel fumes. There's fuel fumes coming back. There's pieces of fire all over the flight deck. Um, Everybody in the net's gone. They're already inside the boat, and it was like, holy shit, what just happened? So the boss, talking to him later, he thought we were all dead because all he saw was this big fireball go by the LSO platform, and he was sure nobody was left. Um, Amazingly enough, nobody else was injured. Amazingly,
That is
of
amazing.
course, Buck and Butch, they didn't make it. It was about 45 G impact when they hit the ramp. The airplane hit just after the intakes. So it was basically the front end of the airplane, fuel tank and cockpit went up the angle deck and went off into the ocean. Um,
Oh,
the two J-79 jet engines made two hoof prints in the back of the boat where the engines hit. So anyway, that was kind of my eye-opening where, holy shit, you can die doing this aircraft carrier stuff. But being young and invincible, you shake it off, right? And you
yeah.
go into port and drink a lot, right? And fix it. It's
So they end up having to go get that fixed, I presume, before they can take it back out again, or no?
didn't do any damage to the boat other than the two hoof prints.
And that
And
didn't cause any issue
they
for.
just sweep it off the deck. And we ended up bingoing everybody to the beach that night. Um, because we had a bingo field to go to, thank God. But it was kind of like you cease operations when something like that happens because it's like, well, okay, we got two guys we know are dead. We don't know if anybody else is injured. We didn't know what the state of the arresting gear is. They'd have to go out and inspect all the wires because all the wreckage went across the wires. We don't know if there was any other damage. We don't know if anything hit the visual landing aid. So you pretty much cease operations for the night and try to take account of what happened.
Right.
Um, so that was that. And fortunately, that was the only two. Well, we actually did. We lost a sailor in Athens, but he drowned in Athens Harbor.
Oh,
Uh,
wow.
so there was only three guys on that cruise. That wasn't awful. It was about average. It's about fleet average.
That
Losing
is
three
so interesting that there would be, like, an average for that.
fleet. It's a dangerous place to be. It
Yeah,
just
I suppose.
um, like I tell people, there are lots of ways to die on an aircraft carrier. Um, we've had people blown overboard that you never find. We had people crushed in doors and elevators. Um, it, it's not a fun place. So so that was the first cruise. I had a lot of fun, even despite all that. I had got teamed up with a great bombardier navigator, and I'm not bragging. This is not bragging, everybody. So relax. Um,
Fingers here is not bragging.
we were on cruise when this happened because my girlfriend at the time actually sent me a. I got a message. Actually, I found it in my little diary. But I was student of the year coming out of the RAG, out of the replacement train group. Student of the year there, and Gus Horologus was the bombardier navigator of the year, and we were crewed together. We were two nuggets crewed together. It's pretty unusual because normally you put a new guy with an experienced guy, right? Not
Usually.
it was two nuggets together. We were a nugget crew, and we actually did really good. Ogie, who he lives actually north of Atlanta right now, and we had a great time. He was a great bombardier navigator, incredibly smart, great with the system, um, saved our lives several times. One of well, actually, I saved our life one time because we had gotten distracted. We were low altitude, and when I looked up, all I could see is water out of the front windscreen.
Oh,
And I pulled up, and we didn't fly into the water. The
that's a
time
good
he
thing.
saved our life was this was pretty interesting. As you come back to the boat, we have a holding pattern we call a Marshall stack, and we were a recovery tanker, so we were at the top of the Marshall stack. We were going to be the last ones to come aboard. So
Okay.
we were at the top of the Marshall stack. So as we're waiting to come aboard, they're launching the next event. So the next event, the fighters have to come up and they'll orbit over the ship to rendezvous, get tanked with the oncoming tanker. All right. So you have the top of the Marshall stack, and then you have the rendezvous stack for the oncoming. Well, Strike told the oncoming guys the wrong altitude. They gave the oncoming F4s our altitude.
Oh
So
no.
they're rendezvousing at our altitude. Well, we're max conserve, which means I'm slow as we can, saving gas. We're facing into the sun on our inbound course. So I'm actually kind of hunkering down behind the instrument panel so I'd have to look in the sun. And we were in a tanker, because I remember this now. We were in a tanker because we've been having trouble with the intercom. And we could, fortunately, in the A6, you could look at each other and talk and take your mask off and yell at each other if you had to. But anyway, I'm hunkered down, and I remember hearing crackling in my headset, and then Ogie's hand was in front of my face pointing. Well, the A6, we call it Grumman Ironworks because it was built like a tank. The canopy bow in the A6 is really substantial. So I remember looking over, I didn't see anything, and I tilted my head back, and again, all I saw is the belly of an F4 coming right at us.
Oh no.
Because he was looking across the circle to rendezvous. So all I could do at that time was just dump. I pulled the stick full forward and ducked. We went under him. We probably missed him by, I don't remember, 10 feet. We heard him go by.
Oh
They
my
felt
gosh.
him go by. They thought we had hit. So we didn't. They went on, they did their mission. We went on and trapped. And that's how we found out later, as Strike had screwed up, they gave our altitude as the rendezvous altitude. And it was the skipper of the F4 squadron, and one of my friends was in his back seat, Barry Hertzgard. So it was close, but no metal, no paint. So it was just one of those sea stories. But anyway,
Which is amazing. I mean, that's an amazing story. And uh, I don't, for the layperson, my
yes,
included here, we don't recognize specifically that. I mean, obviously, flying dangerous, right? I mean, when you're multiple planes all
yeah,
one time, we get that. But the close calls, you just don't necessarily recognize or that the possibility of that until something major occurs, of course, right? That
yeah.
you hear about it. So to me, this is so intriguing to hear these stories. It's
Um,
like,
it's
wow.
well, and also, remember this was the op tempo was Cold War op tempo, and so going back to when I started all this, I graduated in '76, so I missed Vietnam. So who's president?
So was
Carter.
that, yeah, I was gonna say,
Carter.
yeah.
So I went through 4 years of Carter, and that was pretty bad. We had drugs on the boat. We had little mini race wars. Uh,
Oh,
it
wow.
was not a good time. Admiral Zumwalt was just trying to keep a lid on the whole thing. We didn't have any money. It was similar to kind of what we're facing right now.
Yeah.
Um, it was I call it, I don't know if you ever heard the term command climate. You ever heard
I
that?
have not. Mm-mm.
Well, it's kind of logical, right? Because the commander in chief sets the climate.
Right.
Well, so here's Carter, and Jimma was, he was a good heart. He meant well, and he was certainly smart because he went to nuke school. You can't be a dummy and make it through Jaime Rickover's nuke school. You had to be pretty
Right.
smart.
Right.
So
You
he's
had to know what you're doing.
good heart. He just was not. He just wasn't a very good leader. And then, of course, there was the whole hostage mess, right? 444 days. So that brings us to our second cruise. So now we're on our second cruise. If you remember, the Suez Canal was closed. So
Yes.
to Gonzo Station, we left Norfolk. We had to go all the way around Africa. It was 22 days of steaming just to get on station.
Oh, wow.
Gonzo Station was off of Saudi Arabia. And of course, there's no friendlies there. There's no place to go. So it's called blue water ops. There's no place to go. You either land on the boat or you eject. That's your choices. There's no other choice.
Yeah.
So we are blue water ops, and we don't do much. There's not that much money for flying. The hostages are there. It's kind of like everything kind of stopped. And what we did do, however, is get really good tans, because when we were over there, it was an interesting time. It was beautiful, glassy water. We're in the Indian Ocean. It's glassy, just gorgeous blue water, almost cloudless blue sky every day.
Wow.
The water temperature was about 90 degrees,
Oh,
which
geez.
sounds really great, doesn't it? But you see, the problem with that, Carol Lee, is aircraft carriers are made out of steel.
Yep. The
Right?
heat.
Steel is highly conductive.
Yep.
So Joe Kilkenny, who ended up being an admiral, Killer, and I, we got this great steel because we're kind of senior lieutenants in the squadron on this cruise, right? So we're
Oh.
feeling pretty salty, and we get this cool stateroom down below the main deck. So we're below the mess decks in this kind of little cubby hole. There's like 6 staterooms down there, and there's actually an armored hatch. So when they sound general quarters, you have to close this armored hatch. It's a watertight hatch.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
Okay.
couldn't ever really hear very well down there. So you come out of your stateroom and the hatch was closed. And it was like, oh, we must be at general quarters. Then you call the red room. It's like, are we at general quarters? Yeah, where are you guys? Well, sorry, we're in our
Did,
stateroom.
didn't hear a thing.
Oh, couldn't make it. All right, kind of tongue in cheek. But so the stateroom is great. It was a little noisy because right above the main spaces, right above the boiler rooms. But it was a little noisy, not bad, until we got to the IO, and the entire 65,000 tons of the Independence steel heated up to about 90 degrees.
Oh, jeez.
So our average temperature in our room was about 95 to 100. Everything was hot. Your desk steel was hot. The racks, your bunks were hot. The mattresses were hot. It was actually pretty miserable. You had a little fan that blew on you, and that was about as good as it got.
So,
So
how in the world? I mean, other than just staying hydrated, was that how you guys made it through?
pretty much, pretty much.
Ah,
I mean, you kind of get acclimatized. Um, you get into a routine. And the second cruise introduced me to the prison complex. As you talk to more Navy guys, or ship guys, you may hear this. We determined that it's about 45 days at sea that you start to lose your sense of time.
oh,
Where and on the you'll hear a term called port and starboard duty sections. It's 12-hour duty sections.
okay.
So you're basically 12 on, 12 off, and you just do that 7 days a week, and that's what you do. You get up and you go to work and you do whatever you're doing. We fly one event. If you're in the shop, you work. You maintain airplanes or do paperwork, and then go work out. You eat a couple of times, and then you go to bed and you read or sleep. Killer had this theory that if he could sleep 12 hours a day, the cruise would be half as long. So it's it's a good
You know,
theory.
yeah, I was gonna say that's probably an accurate
He
statement.
was he was pretty serious about it because he was logging his sleep time, so he was serious about it. I wasn't that good at logging sleep time, but what we did do, we had a lot of downtime because we didn't. Well, like I said, there was no money. We would fly like 5 events a day. You'd fly 4 day and a pinky, so you could keep your night qual.
A pinky. What's pinky?
Pinky is night recovery, so it's just kind of darkish, but not real dark yet. But you're going to count it as a night trap because to maintain your currency at the boat, you had to have one night landing every 7 days. So you
Okay.
work the schedule so that every 7th day you got your night landing, which is not enough. It would be awful, but that's what we did. Daytime, I don't even remember what the daytime was. Daytime quals were pretty easy to maintain. Like I told you, night was completely different.
Right.
Um, so the IO cruise was pretty boring. So what we ended up doing was we created the Power Tanning League, and we had Paul Brown, who's dead now. He ended up died of brain cancer.
Oh,
He
that's
was a
too
Yankee. He was from Massachusetts, likewise, redhead, Irish guy. It was kind of his idea to come up with the Power Tanning League. So we had the conferences. We had the Bow Conference and the Waste Conference and the Island Conference. And all these guys. It was completely. He even created the Sun Times. It was our mimeographed Power Tanning League newspaper,
Oh
and
my
we all
gosh.
made up. It was hysterical. And I couldn't find it, but there's a picture that a squadron took, and I'm kind of in the front with Ogie, and Ogie's Greek, Gus Horologus, so he's good. So he tans really well, and I was working on it, and we looked like we're from someplace different than than, than we were. So it made it kind of lighthearted, but really it was fairly awful.
Yeah.
So being out there with no place to go, every 45 days we called it beer day. We got two beers. So the first beer day the ship had done in who knows how long, so they didn't really know what they were doing. So one, the beer was warm, and
Oh,
two, they handed out tickets so you could get your beers. Well, what they didn't really count on was the guys that didn't drink would give
passing
it
those to
a buddy.
somebody. Yes. Yes.
So in the meantime, there are a couple of sailors that got pretty well smashed, and we found that out the hard way as because what we did is we had a steel beach day, so you had a big cookout. You do a 5K run, and you'd have games and stuff. So kind of festive. Well, as we're out there on the beach, and it's really kind of cool. It's fun. We hear this, and you look up to see this EA-6B canopy flying through the air. So one of the sailors was so drunk he thought it would be a good idea to blow one of the EA-6B canopies. Well, the EA-6B canopies are coated in gold because
Oh
that's the
no.
electronic warfare airplane. So
Oh,
that's a high dollar item.
I was gonna say, what does that run?
Um, Hundreds of thousands.
Wow.
And the reason the EA-6Bs are a national asset, they're not like a Navy asset. They are a national asset, if you get my drift,
Yep.
because of what they could do. One airplane could easily shut down an entire city. I mean, they could fry everything in the city. There was that much power, which is why we never really liked flying formation on them. You didn't really want to get close to them because you just you trust your brothers, right? But
Yeah,
they're
right.
okay. Yeah. So
Things happen.
so things happen.
Oh
So
my gosh. Those are some really, really interesting stories. Oh my gosh. So did he get reprimanded at all or no?
oh, well, the cool thing about being at ship at sea is the captain literally is uh, the captain. He's God. You're in international waters. Now UCMJ applies.
Yeah.
And so that young man probably spent a week to 2 weeks in shackles on bread and water.
Oh my gosh.
Literally, like if you were looked at your old sailing movies, the guys, yeah, that's it. In shackles on bread and water. So never mind being docked pay and demoted in rank.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So that happened a couple of times that I remember. The other time was that was also on that cruise, by the way, um, when we had gotten to Perth for Liberty. A
Mhm.
sailor actually smuggled a gal on board, smuggled a girl, and we didn't find her until about 3 days out. So we had to turn
I'm
around,
sorry.
go back to Australia so he could helo the gal off. He spent about 2 weeks in bread and water and shackles.
My
So,
gosh. Oh my gosh, that really happened. That is
oh
hilarious.
yeah, oh yeah. So,
You imagine being that woman though, right?
well, she has quite a story to tell.
I'm
And
sure she does.
so, out of that cruise, we finally get a port call to Perth, which is fabulous. It took us, as I remember, it was like 10 or 11 days to get there because we had to go across all the way to the Indian Ocean. When we got to Perth, and of course, here we've been at sea for, I don't even know, 3 months or something.
Mhm.
And some things start to happen. So I told you, your concept of time starts to change. Your whole equilibrium is at sea. So you
Right.
have not been on dry land for so long. When you get on land, your body is moving.
Yep.
So we actually get seasick on land. It's the weirdest feeling. All right. So how do you fix that? We go drink. Obviously, there's only one solution to that. So we set up, and I can't remember what the hotel was in Perth, but we set up an admin where the squadron rented a room in the hotel, and fully stocked. And as I remembered, it was about a 5-day toga party. Um,
Wow.
the people of Perth were incredible. We had been one of the first carriers in there since Vietnam.
Oh, okay.
And it was, like I say, a 5-day toga party. Sailors were going home with people. You couldn't buy a drink. Um, the people were just wonderful. We had more people when we left Fremantle. After our 5 days, we thought there were more people waving goodbye to us on the dock at Fremantle than when we left on cruise from Norfolk.
Oh, wow.
It was unbelievable. So it was a great experience, and it was good that we had it because other than 4 days in Mauritius, that was the only time we set foot on land for the whole. I think it was 215 days.
Oh. And you were there for how long on land?
Five
5 days.
five
Okay.
days.
How long did it take you to get your land legs back, if you will?
Never happened on that one. Uh, as I remember, when I finally got back from that cruise, and it was actually that cruise, when I got back to Norfolk, it was probably a week before because I would be standing, especially if you had to stand still. If you were moving, it wasn't too bad. But when you were standing still, your body would just
Yeah.
start moving, and that was like, oh, holy crap!
Yes.
Nothing's moving. It's me. It was
Yep.
really interesting. So interesting experience. Let's see that one. Um, so we went to Mauritius for. We actually were supposed to have 5 days. We only got 4 days because it was too rough to put the Liberty boats in the water. Um, but it was a really interesting place. Mauritius is off of Madagascar. We didn't know anything about the place. Um, it was a beautiful tropical looking island, big volcano and all that stuff.
Oh, well.
Their main crop was sugarcane. And we go, wow, this should be great. So we get into port, um, and it's kind of sketchy. In
Really?
fact, it's destitute poverty. People
Wow.
living in cardboard boxes and things like that. So we actually went to it. They do have some resorts on the island because there's beautiful, fluffy coral sand beaches and palm trees and all that. A lot of South Africans and a lot of Northern Europeans went down there for holiday. Um, so that was pretty interesting. Other than that, you really didn't go out.
Hmm.
It was guards with guns on the fence line at the uh, resort. So that was like interesting, but not great. So
Right.
we go back to Gonzo Station, and then finally it's time to go because the hostages were released. That was great news. What do we do now? Um, the canal opened, the Suez Canal opened. So the captain says, "Good news, boys. We're going through the canal to go home. The bad news is we're taking a right." Where does that put you? Off of Beirut, as usual. So we got extended. So we were already extended just to be on Gonzo Station, but we went through the canal and then went off of Lebanon for the duty. And lots of boats have done this. The duty and standing by for embassy evacuation, right? Because that's what we do. Went through the canal, which was really cool. I got some great pictures. Some of the canal, part of the canal was so narrow that all you could see off the flight deck was sand. Either way.
Oh. Oh, wow.
So off the left side is Egypt. Went by a couple of air defense sites with SA-2s, surface-to-air missiles still on the rails. On
Oh,
the right side was the Sinai, which would have been from the 73 war. So there you could see all little burned out personnel carriers and tanks way out in the desert there from the 73 war.
wow.
It was quite remarkable. And then we went off, set off of Beirut, and I think it was like for a couple of weeks. Didn't really fly very much. We're just standing by for embassy evacuation because, those folks over there and how they act, it's not always civilized.
Right.
So anyway, it was time that we finally got home. So off of that cruise, we only lost 3 people, as I remember it. One of them was actually I was airframes division officer as well as an LSO, but it was um, Buck, and what was his last name? Can't remember his last name. I can see his face. AMH2, he's a hydraulics maintenance man. Cruise experienced. Um, we're getting ready to launch. So when you launch airplanes, they're spotted all back over the LSO platform. So we're standing with my team under the platform, waiting to go up until the launch happens, and then we can go up, set up the platform for the recovery. So we're sitting there, the airplanes are turning. We can't go out because there's airplanes literally right over our head. And then all of a sudden, everybody's shutting down. It's kind of, oh, that's kind of weird.
Hmm.
So we go up on deck to try to figure out what's happening. And everybody's crowded around this one S3 Viking. The S3 had 2 TF34 turbofans that are about at body level. TF34, a turbofan means there's one big open fan in front of the engine driven by a little compressor. So there's really no protection. If you go in the front of the engine, you're hitting the fan. The S3 was kind of weird because they had auxiliary power unit to provide starting power for one engine. Then they shut the APU down, run that engine up to a higher power to start the other engine. Kind of weird. I don't know why you did that, but that's what they did. So they're running up that engine, and my AMH2 comes out of the catwalk and walks in front of the engine. Got sucked into the engine, and basically the only thing that came out was his legs.
Oh,
So
wow.
that's what happened. So all the airplanes that were up there waiting, they all watched that. So they're done. they're not going anywhere.
Right.
Flight ops were shut down. They had to take accounting, clean everything up, and it was like great. And that was one of my guys. So, what the hell happened? And now you're in accident review type of thing, like what happened, why, what were all the factors. So that shut all that down. So that was the first guy. Then Brooks Montgomery, we went through flight school together at Beeville. He was in the F4s, and then Gus Grissom was in an A7. He was VA 15 at the time. So both of them had launched, both had launched. The A7 went out. He had a hydraulic failure, so he had his gear down. He was coming back at an odd altitude. Brooks went out, and he was looking for the oncoming tanker. It was just one of those happenstance. They met at the altitude. The sun was in their eyes, is what we surmised. Brooks never saw the A7, so they hit. The F4 went through the right wing of the A7. So the right wing of the A7 went through the cockpit of the F4. Gus in the A7, all he knew was he's flying, and then he feels his big thump, and there's an F4 coming apart in pieces in front of him. So he ejects. So he's okay. Of course, Brooks and his Rio died. So that was those 2 guys on that cruise. So that was it. So we only lost 3 on that one. Go back to port, and again, trying to decompress after port. And the reason I like your program, Carol Lee, is you're able to get the guys to talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
And my little stories here about decompressing, nothing what these guys are facing today. Plus, you've got to remember, I was a Cold War guy, and who was my commander in chief for 8 years? Ronald Reagan.
Yep.
And I talked about command climate earlier. When Reagan took office, it was like somebody flipped a switch. It was a complete change, just like we just saw 3 years ago, right?
Yep.
And I know you know what I'm talking about. So for all those guys and you guys listening, if anybody's serving today, thank you so much for what you're doing. I kind of know what you're talking about because I had 4 years of Carter, which was really pretty bad, but it's nothing like what you guys are facing today. So my heart goes out to you. I wish I was younger so I could help. But in any case, questions so far? How we doing?
Let's see. Let's see. Well, we have has joined us, your buddy Kirk.
Yeah, there you go. Hey, Tadpole.
He says, Jim, was that the?
Something he's typing. You should congratulate Tadpole because
Oh, wait.
he.
Here we go. The Gus
Nope,
Grissom astronaut.
nope, not Gus the astronaut. It was just his. I can't remember his first name. It was Grissom. So obviously his call sign was going to be Gus. So nothing that fancy. A good dude. VA-15 A7 guy. You should be proud of Tadpole. You congratulate him because he passed his airline transport pilot written exam today with a 90.
Oh, that was today.
That was
Oh,
today.
Kirk, congratulations. I'm really happy for you. That is
So
very exciting.
what
Let's
we're hoping is to have Kirk at Delta with us pretty soon. That's
I think he's pretty excited for that, actually,
I would
from
hope so.
my conversation. So
Well, we're working on it. We're working. It's a work in progress. So
there you go. Patience is a virtue. So Mike McClune was with us for a bit. He has since dropped off, but his dad was Navy on the CV USS Wasp, 62
yep.
through 67.
In fact, I'm trying to remember. Both of my cousins were on the Wasp, but I don't remember what years. They might have been just prior to that. But yeah, they were Wasp guys. It was a Essex class carrier. You know, we built what was it, 27 of them in World War II, and they soldiered on for a long time. Like I told you, CVT-16 Lexington, the Lady Lex,
Mhm.
that I CQ'd twice on, um, was the second Lexington after the first one was sunk. And we call them 27 Charlie. If you talk to a carrier guy, it's they'll probably say 27 Charlie, which was one of the mod programs that they did to put the angle deck on the carrier. Now,
Okay.
those World War II carriers were all, we call them straight decks, so there's no angle. So you basically had to land or stop. If you didn't stop in the wires, you stopped in the barrier. It caused a lot of damage. And then you'd have guys bounce over the barrier into the pack up in front, cause lots of damage. So it was actually the British that taught us about the angled deck. So if you just tilt the landing area off like 10 degrees, then if you miss the wires, you just keep going, come back around again. You don't have to crash and die. What a concept. All right.
See, and you get something out of it from them, right? That's
Yeah.
exciting.
They also developed the Fresnel lens landing aid that we still use, well, partly today. Our solution was a mirror that was literally a mirror with a source light. So the mirror is tilted to give you the glide path, and we called it a meatball because it was kind of an amber light. So you had that meatball in between your datum lights. There was a row of green lights. You try to put that amber light, keep that amber light right in line with the green line. With the green lights, that meant you're on your glide path. So if the meatball went low, you were low. If it was high, you were high. Pretty simple. The problem with the mirror was salt air. So one, the mirror is pretty big. You couldn't really stabilize it. So as the ship is pitching and rolling, the ball would move, but it wasn't because of you. It was because of the ship pitching and rolling. Two, the salt would get on the mirror surface and start corroding the mirror surface. So after a while, you didn't have a ball after anywhere.
Oh,
So British came up with this lens. It was called a Fresnel lens, and you've seen them before. If you've been in, if you've seen the traffic lights that you can only see from the lane you're in,
yep.
that's a Fresnel lens. So we came up with 5 of those. So there's one in the center, and then 2 high and 2 low. They're colored amber, so you've got a meatball to look at. And as you go high or low, that meatball Fresnel lens transitions seamlessly between the lenses to tell you whether you're high or low. Worked great. Doesn't corrode, and it's a smaller unit, so you could actually tie it into the ship's inertial navigation system to stabilize it. So it was stabilized to a certain extent for roll and pitch. As the ship is moving, it would actually stabilize it.
Wow.
What it could not compensate for was heave. So if the ship was in a long enough swell and the whole ship raised out of the water, it would not compensate for that. So if the ship came up to you flying constant glide path, the ball would go down. If the
Hmm.
ship settled into a trough, it would go
Go
high.
up.
But that wasn't you. That was the
Right.
ship. So
Right.
that's how the complication of getting aboard ship happens. If the ship started moving too much beyond stabilization limits, we would rig what we called a MOVLess, manually operated visual system. And basically, it was an LSO with a big rheostat that you controlled, and you would literally show the guy high or low as you needed to control him. It
Hmm.
was quite a tool that we had. So you could rig it and literally fly the airplane for the guy. And what we would do, the boarding rate, the number of guys that got aboard using a Moveless was usually really good, because I'm hoping I'm not giving away too many secrets here. It's kind of different nowadays.
Find out if you get a phone call.
But even if a guy's showing his perfect pass, as he comes to the ramp, you just start tweaking that ball a little bit up to show him a little bit high. So he'll ease gun a little bit and go into maybe a two, even a one wire. And if he did what you told him, it was an okay pass. So in a Moveless, you could actually have okay ones.
Hmm.
So I hope, does that everybody understand passes? So it's a 4 point, actually 5 point grading system. Okay, no comment is a 5. Okay with comments is a 4. Fair with comments is a 3.
Three.
A no grade is a 2, and then cut pass is 0. That's
Yeah.
unsafe pass. And then you have a wave off, which is 0, and you have a bolter, which could be 0 or it could be a graded pass. If you miss the wires over no fault of your own, either the ship moved or we had what we call hook skips. The hook would actually bounce over the wires, and you flew it past. That could be an okay bolter. I had 5 bolters one time in the A6, and you had a dash pot that would hold the hook down. Well, the dash pot bled out, so there was nothing holding the hook down.
Oh, wow.
And
Fingers
so,
is the man. Thank you, Jim, for paving the way for all of us GWOT folks.
yeah, well, like I said, I was a Cold War guy, which actually, I guess you could say that was our coldest war, but it was a Cold War. Tadpole and all his brothers have been in our longest hot war, and
Yeah.
it's different. It's different.
Lillian
So,
says, no kidding. Us GWOT guys are like boots to this guy.
yeah, no kidding, man. So, anyway, anybody have any questions out there?
Yeah, if you guys have some questions, go ahead and get them put in the comments for me, and we'll get Jim to get those.
By the way, don't take this Bama Cup seriously. I'm only doing it because my daughter went to Bama, but my son went to UGA. So come football day, it just depends on who's playing. So
Yeah. You know, we have a niece who went to Alabama, and yeah, so
how's she doing?
Good as far as I know. I actually think she graduated.
Good.
Yeah,
Is she gainfully employed?
I'm not sure. I haven't talked to my brother lately, and they're out of California, and so she actually had gotten
We're in
accepted
California.
the San Diego area.
Okay, that's probably okay. So I have a sister that lives up in Sonoma County,
Oh, okay.
and near Santa Rosa, and love her to death. She's a wonderful lady, but she's a communist. So yeah, actually, still probably not communist. She's a Green Party type, but she's just a wonderful person and doesn't really do the whole political thing. And she's got great kids, and so love her to death. She's almost 81, and she's still out there taking care of the grandkids and
Wow.
people around, and just a wonderful person. So no issue there.
I have a question for my kid. Who this is his general question. So just so did you ever have an opportunity to serve with the Marines?
Yeah, well, actually, funny you should ask that. Did I tell you that before
You did
when we
not.
were talking?
I
I
don't
didn't.
believe I don't believe you did, but you might have.
So this is pretty interesting because that leads right. Is somebody reading my mind? You know, I've
That
never
would be
done
me.
that because that actually logically goes right into my next tour. I got out of, and actually after my first cruise was interesting. I had over, I don't know, I had like almost 400 hours in the A6, and I had, 150 traps, and I like flying. The squadron was great. I love the guys, but a lot of my time was in tankers. And the A6 at the time was actually starting to show its age a little bit. We were starting to get G limited airplanes where wings were cracking and things. And it was kind of like, there's something else. So I wanted to get out.
So Kirk wants to know if you had laser designated weapons or GPS guided
Yeah,
weapons when you were in the
yeah,
A.
we had tadpole. We called them trams, target um, target recognition attack multi sensor. So we had a flare, we had a laser designator that we could use, and a laser receiver. So we could self-designate and we could buddy laze. And it was actually when we practiced with it, it was actually a pretty good system. But it was really kind of new, nothing like what you guys can do nowadays. Um, so we were still figuring out tactics, um, trying to keep the systems up, and the FLIR video compared to what you guys have today is pretty rudimentary, but it was what we had at the time. So it was, like I say, it was a great airplane. Carried a whole bunch of stuff. I think my favorite bomb load was 12,000 pounders. So 12,000 pound of bombs. Mark 84s were fun. That was 2,000 pounders, but you could only carry 5 of those. But it moved a lot of dirt. Um, we could carry 28 Mark 82s. That's 500 pounders, which is a lot. Mark 82, you had to be pretty accurate with it to do the damage. The Marines were smarter. The reason we couldn't carry 30 was that with the gear doors would get in the way. So the Marines were smart. They just took off the gear doors, so they were able to hang 2 more 500 pounders. Smart. See what I'm telling you? Those Marines, which is one of the reasons I went out to my next tour, which was out at Lemoore. I was really, again, luck. One of the first instructors in the F-18 training squadron out at Lemoore, VFA 125. I was not a plank holder because that was the first 16 guys that got out there to actually turn on the lights and get the office equipment, get the phone set up, start getting the initial airplanes. I was in the second group of 16 instructors. So we had an initial cadre of 32 instructors. And it was a unique, once in a lifetime, really opportunity. It was pretty funny because, I got Hornets, and actually the Navy's pretty parochial, as I guess most services are. So I put in my preference card to Hornets first. The next was, I think it was, what was the next one? Exchange Tour F-16s, Exchange Tour A-10s, Exchange Tour F-15s or something. I don't know. I just wanted out of the community to go do something else. And of course, fingers, you're going to the Hornet. Well, it's going to mess up your career, and you get out of there. They're not going to buy the airplane. At the time, if you look at the news items, it was the whole uproar about, oh, the airplane, it's going to be integrated. No, it's not going to be an airplane. They're not going to buy it. It's all messed up. Blah blah. All this is going back and forth, and it's all standard finagling back and forth. Um, the airplane was going through Apaval. As I drove out to Lemoore in January 1982, I took the southern route and I went through Albuquerque. I'm driving across the desert. I drive across the high desert by Edwards Air Force Base. The right stuff in Mojave and all
Yep.
this stuff. And man, I'm gonna be a fighter pilot. This is freaking awesome. All right, drive up the Sierra Nevadas, drive across the Hatchby Pass. This is so cool. It's January 1982. Now, you don't see it as much nowadays because they've stopped irrigating the San Joaquin Valley. In those days, they were farming 24/7, 365.
Yep.
So there's irrigation everywhere. They're farming. There's dust, we call it condensation nuclei in the air. So as all that moisture in January and it's cold, they call it tule fog. Anybody know what I'm talking about? Tule fog. The reason
I've
we
not
call
heard of that.
Tule Fog is that southern part of the San Joaquin Valley is the Tulare Lake Basin. Its natural state is a dry lake bed.
Okay.
As it's irrigated, it's not dry, it's wet. So in the winter, when you have all that moisture and all that dirt, it
You get
turns
that
into this Tule
condensation.
fog. Yeah, that's it. And you've probably seen fog like this, but we would call it by the number of lines you could see in the road. So a average day was about probably 3 to 4 lines, dashed lines you could see in the road. That's all you could see. If it was a really bad day, we call it was a one-liner
Hmm.
because it's all you could see was one dash line in the road. So I had no idea. I'm just driving along California 99, trying to find the exit signs,
Good luck.
trying to figure out where I am. I was, I think, 99 goes through Visalia, which is a pretty cool town, by the way. Drive through Hanford, which, interesting enough, has a 5-star Chinese restaurant in Hanford, California.
Really interesting.
Well, yeah, I don't know why that would be there. A really great place. Drive out to
Good.
Lemoore. Lemoore is one of those bases where it's interesting. The base housing is about 4 miles away from the base. So when you get onto the base, it's just houses and buildings and admin. The airplanes are way up there. So drive up through the fog, get to the hangar where VFA 125 is. There's a few cars in the parking lot, no humans. Walk out of the hangar, no humans, but there's an A7 way over in the corner up on jacks that's broke. No airplanes out on the flight line. Thinking, okay, this is kind of sketchy. Go up, finally find the admin officer. It was like, oh, fingers, hey, glad you're here. Like, where's everybody? Oh, they're down in Yuma. So I learned how you fly in Tule fog in California in the wintertime. You go someplace else. So they were all down in Yuma. We had 10 jets at the time. It was very interesting because we actually had 2 pre-production airplanes. The flight control scheme was completely different than the production airplanes. Had flight test and instruments in them. Really kind of cool. Nobody knew what they were. Nobody knew what was doing. There was no books. There
Hmm.
was no publications that we could use for training. We went to St. Louis to the McDonnell factory. They plunked us in this little trainer. We had classroom work, which was overhead projectors, and grease pencils and stuff.
Yep.
Pretty not that good. The simulator was a little cockpit procedures trainer that kind of worked. The visual was a little screen in front of you with a model board visual. If anybody knows what that is, it's literally the side of a warehouse with a model board to scale with a little camera on a gantry that flies around that projects that onto the screen in front of you.
Interesting.
It's pretty hysterical because it was good enough for us to kind of get the main thing about the Hornet was the primary instrument was the HUD, the heads up display. Every other airplane at that time really didn't have that. The only instrument in the Hornet is the HUD. Other airplanes had HUDs, but you had your primary flight instruments elsewhere.
Right.
The F-16 being the competitive example, because if you remember, the fly-off was between the F-16 and the YF-17, which the YF-17 became the F-18 Hornet. Both of those were fly-by-wire, computer-controlled airplanes, cutting edge. The F-16, however, was built as a day VFR fighter. So the HUD was a weapons delivery instrument. It wasn't designed initially to be a instrument flying instrument. The Hornet was designed from the ground up to be, this is your instrument. This is what you're going to use to get aboard the boat. It's what you're going to use to fly from point A to point B. It's what you're going to use to deliver weapons. So with that, having even that little display, it kind of got us used to the Hornet, the HUD display. They also had a ACM dome that we used that was actually not terribly useful, but it kind of got us used to the piccolo drill is what we called it, because the other concept was HOTAS, which Tadpole knows HOTAS from Apache days. It's hands-on throttle and stick, or hands
Okay.
on throttle, and collective if you're a helo guy. And you're allowed to control just about the whole airplane just using your fingers on the controls. Um, Kind of radical concept at the time. Single seat fighter, and it was FA, so it's fighter and attack. And of course, the fighter guys are going, oh yeah, yeah, fighter guy. You guys don't know anything about fighter guys, fighter stuff. So they always called it the FNAA team. So as they would, um, and I will give them their props because I was an attack guy, and actually I was the only X6 guy out there, and I think the way they wanted me out there because of radar attack bombing. The other thing that the F-18 had was a incredible radar. Um, Not a lot of power out, but a lot of sensitivity and computer processing. We had Doppler beam sharpened modes, which was all new, which was good enough from about 10 miles. You could take a radar picture of a place, and I remember specifically doing this at Edwards Air Force Base. And when you were close enough, for example, to an airfield, you could see the runways, the taxiways, individual buildings, airplanes holding at a holding spot, arresting your motors on the runway. It was that detailed. Well, what that
Wow.
allowed you to do is target that stuff.
Hmm.
You could designate those things as targets and then bomb them. So it was a level of detail and accuracy that we hadn't really seen before. The A6 had that, but again, you had to have the bombardier navigator that was able to use that radar good enough to kind of pick out stuff like that, but it still wasn't that detailed.
Yeah.
Um, so kind of got off on a tangent. The most interesting thing about that command was that it was a split Marine Navy command. We had a Navy CO, a Marine XO, and it was that way all the way down to the E1s.
Oh,
It
wow.
was incredible. Some of the greatest guys, you may have heard this, but some of the best officers I've ever served with the Marines, and some of the biggest assholes I've ever served with were Marines. It was an amazing assemblage of people. We had guys from every community. I was the only A6 guy, but we had A4 guys from the Marines, S4 guys. We had F14 guys, F4 guys. Um, let's see, do we have any EA6B guys? I don't remember. Um, it was mostly attack, tactical, and fighter, but it was just a great thing. And of course, we had a brand new airplane that nobody knew anything about. One of the most entertaining things was base radio, because base radio we always monitored. It was like our admin freak, and a guy would call in and say, "Hey, base, does anybody know what this means?" Because we really had nothing. We had a few days training in McDonnell Douglas. We had no manuals. We are figuring out as we went. We were the ones that actually had to develop the syllabus to train the guys that we were going to get for initial.
Right.
Um, they had actually had some people developing stuff, and in those days, this was pretty cool. Of course, we had slides. We had the carousel projectors.
Yeah.
You could do your own slides. We had overhead projectors, really awful. But we also had was the first computer-based training, and it was a light pen on a screen. I don't know if anybody's ever seen this, but it was you had a light pen and you
Mm-mm.
touched the screen, and you had a whole syllabus to go through that they developed, and we call it "Turn in all the boxes green." So you answered
Okay.
questions with a light pen. You could throw switches with a light pen. You could turn knobs with a light pen, and then you
Interesting.
quiz, and you turn your box green, and you could progress to the next lesson.
Okay.
Nowadays it's like, wow, how did we ever do that? At the time, it was like, holy crap, this is pretty
High tech.
cool.
That's high
So,
tech.
and it was what's his name, Randa, Rabbit, and Amanda. So Rabbit was one of the F-14 guys from Miramar, and his wife Amanda was actually the IT person who was developing all the computer-based training.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
Pretty cool. Really cool group. The op tempo was very high because one, we were getting newer planes at the rate of several a month. We had to develop the NATOPS manual for it, as well as try to figure out how it worked. as
Yeah.
well as training new people. So fortunately, the first people that we trained were transition squadrons. The first actual group was VA 25 and VA 113 from right across the street. They were A7 guys, and we transitioned them into the Hornet. So it was pretty funny because, as I told you, parochial wise, um, attack guys are, they think they're pretty shit hot, and fighter guys think they're pretty shit hot, and so you get these fighter guys, and it's like, yeah, this is a great bomber because the F-18 was a great bomber. Yeah, this fighter stuff. Well, you finally get them into the fighter stuff, and they figure out, dude, this fighter stuff isn't that easy. And in
Hmm.
fact, if you get into a multi-bogey fight, the whole dogfight idea, yeah, that doesn't work. So, fighter weapons tactics thing was a rude awakening to them because their targets are moving, and it's
Yeah.
incredibly dynamic. So that was an eye opener for me. On the other side, when we started transitioning the fighter guys, and it was the Marine Corps, it was um, VMFP uh, 323 and VMF 323 and 323 and 314 from El Toro. It was the Snakes and the Black Knights. They were the first ones that we transitioned in the Hornet. They're kind of fighter guys, and they're thinking, well, how hard could this bombing thing be? You're just dropping a bomb. Well, actually, there's a little more to it. So both communities kind of got a feel for what the other community went through. I still think we came up with pretty much the theory: air combat maneuvering skills are the most volatile, the highest rate of degradation. The next is night carrier landings.
Oh,
Um,
yeah.
the next is day carrier landings, and probably after that comes bombing. Um,
Wow.
so,
So,
so
how long was your total time then in the Navy?
I had this is pretty interesting. So I enlisted January 70 or June 74,
Hmm.
and then went active duty 76. Got hired by Delta in 1989 when I got went to reserves. Did ready reserves for 4 years, individual ready reserves for 3 years, for a total of 21.
Wow. That's a long time. And
Um, but it goes fast, right?
I was just going to say it does, especially where you're transitioning from one to another in what you were doing, like reserve, delta, and so on.
That made
You
it much
actually-
made
Yeah,
it much faster. So going to the Hornet was, and like I say, once in a lifetime opportunity.
right.
I was a landing signals officer, and so I was the second senior one. It was uh, Dave Thompson was the first one. So the first carrier air wing to deploy with Hornets was West Coast. So Dave went to the West Coast. The next air wing to deploy with Hornets was on the East Coast on the, I got it right here, Coral Sea,
Look at
CV-480,
that.
the Eagles Warrior. Um, the Coral Sea was unique because that was a midway class of 43. There were only three boats in that class. It was Midway, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, and Coral Sea. Midway, cooked for a long time. They were based in Japan. FDR was retired in the late 70s. Coral Sea was still cooking, but it was a West Coast boat. It was San Diego. Well, when they went to the Hornet, that class of carrier was too small to take the Tomcats. They had to figure out what to do with it. So they said, well, we'll send it to the East Coast and we'll put 4 Hornet squadrons on there. So again, that continued my relation with the Marines because we went on cruise in 1985 with 2 Navy Hornet squadrons and 2 Marine Hornet squadrons. No S3s, no F-14s. We were basically a CVA. We were an attack carrier. It was pretty cool.
Wow.
The ship was an operator. It was old, and we would go on water hours where there was no fresh water. But man, she was just the operating ship. The Hornet was a great airplane operating the deck. We had our A6s, VA-55. Those guys did a great job. And of course, our other contingents of debts, VAQ 1, I think it was VAQ 132 or 133. And then we had our whale. We had an EA3 from the VQ2 debt was aboard. Probably nobody knows what a whale is. It's the A3 Sky Warrior, which eventually
Okay.
became, because the A3 was also built as a nuke delivery vehicle, big, like 70,000 pound twin engine airplane. They would
Goodness.
put those on 27 Charlies. Uh, Again, Ed Heinemann design, totally impractical for carriers. It was just too big. I mean, it was
Wow.
huge. The cockpit was weird. If you could get a guy that could bring a whale aboard, well, he was above average. In fact, Rich Schwank was made top 10 at least once, maybe twice in the whale, which was remarkable. A
Hmm.
guy that could fly the airplane that well. It was famous because we call it the whale dance, because of the way the gear was. Whenever it touched down, it would just bounce on the flight deck. So
Oh
we
my
call it the whale dance.
gosh.
It was quite an airplane. So we had that dead aboard the boat. The Navy guys, VFA 131 and 132 did a great job. 131 had some all stars. 132 had all stars. Bunch of Top Gun guys. Bunch of Blue Angels came out of those guys. Um, the uh, the Marine Corps, I love the Corps. Um, they do some weird stuff. So what they did was VMFA 323 got all the carrier qual guys, all the cruise experience guys. VMFA 314 got all the test pilots because they were the cool dudes. See, they were the test pilots. They were really smart. So they had not one cruise experienced aviator in that squadron. So I was an Air Wing LSO with Chip Williamson. Chippy was senior. He flew with 323. I was the next in line, so I flew with 314. And in fact, our two personalities on the boat were unique. There's a great picture in my cruise book that coincidentally got used for a video game, F-16 Falcon 4.0, as one of the yeah, I found it by chance, and it's like, holy crap, that's me. And the reason you know it's me is it was a guy, the ship's photographer. It's a really good picture, but it's close up in the Hornet cockpit, so all you can see is my helmet and the patch on my left arm. Well, the Marine Corps has red patches, right? Red Hornet
Mhm.
patches. The Navy has blue Hornet patches.
Okay.
The Navy has their squadron tape on the helmet. So we had our squadron. So Chippy had VMFA 323 tape, which was kind of brown and gold. VMFA 314, the Black Knights, was black and red. So I have VMFA 314 helmet with a little 314 logo on my helmet. Well, I'm the only guy on the boat that has that. So that was me. All right. So we flew those squadrons. 323 did a great job. Bunch of great guys in that squadron. Again, all crews. In fact, Jim Burke, Samurai, um, which that's a whole nother story because he was actually the first Marine that I met in VA 176 because he did an exchange tour with VA 176 on my second cruise.
Oh well.
Kind of cool. So we go way back. He's actually living in a little flying community a little bit south of here, building a hangar. Just a cool dude.
So
So
let me ask you if you don't mind
yeah.
my interrupting you. So because I don't want to forget asking this question. When you were transitioning back into civilian, I mean,
Yeah.
I'm assuming that was probably an easier thing to do because you were already back in reserves and then also into the corporate world with Delta. Is that accurate?
Oh yeah. Like I said, um, Cold War guy, and I told you I only got shot at once. I didn't like it. I was actually on a cap station um, in Gulf of Sidra for that cruise. We were there. Coral Sea was one of the battle groups that was there
Okay.
for El Dorado Canyon when we bombed Tripoli and Benghazi. So Fortunately, I think for us, we were over by Benghazi. Benghazi was our target. We sent the A6s in that night with Rockeye. We had Hornets for a bunch of missions, SEAD, suppression of enemy air defense, CSAR, and all that. It was a pretty remarkable night. I didn't get to fly because I was one of the CAG LSOs. So I was actually a bean counter up in the tower. Chippy was on the platform waving. We launched, I want to say, 34 airplanes that night.
Oh, geez.
Total MCON. It was a dark night. 34 airplanes. The only radio comm that night during the launch was launch the Wildcat spare, because the Hornet was an incredible airplane, very reliable, but this particular airplane took off and his system dumped. Kind of weird. Mike Anderson, Spock, was the Wildcat spare, and he had about 3 sets of kneeboard cards with him because he was the spare. So whichever mission he had to fill, that's the one he had to fill. So off he goes, and I can't even remember which one it was. It might have been a SEAD mission. So we launched the guys into Benghazi, and the only radio comm we heard after that was the E2 calling guys feet wet coming out. It's pretty remarkable. So leading up to that mission, we were in port in Naples in December for Christmas leave, and there was an attack at Rome and Vienna airports. Plus, before there had been an attack at a cafe up in Berlin, I think it was. So the terrorists were busy.
Yeah.
And in fact, I was in Rome with a girlfriend in the hotel room when the attack happened at the Rome airport. And it was like, holy shit. So we went back. So we knew they were serious. I think it was the Achille Lauro had happened at the time. I'm probably getting things messed up. Anyway, the terrorists were pretty active. Gaddafi was, he was shooting his mouth off, and Reagan was getting kind of tired of it. So our mission was to go harass. Line of Death, Sea of Blood, Gulf of Sidra, we called it trolling for Libyans, and that's what we did. So he had claimed the Line of Death. We only recognized the 12-mile limit. So we would go screaming down in there trying to drag him out. And in fact, prior to him shooting the SA-5s that day, I think we had 120 something intercepts of, it was really pretty cool. I got some great pictures too. I should have dug those out, but MiG-23s, MiG-25s, Su-22s. He said they're missile boats. They had Nanuchkas that would come out, and we would all take pictures of them and stuff. Really, it was kind of fun. But I just happened to be and they weren't going to come out and fight. We were pretty sure of that. So we were confident in sending out single plane caps. I was on a 1-plane cap mission over by Benghazi that day. And all of a sudden, the radar warning receivers start going off. And way down to the south, I can see there's missile trails. There's white trails up in the. This is interesting. And so I get the coded message from the E2 to attack. And like, attack what? Well, our standard loadout for the Hornet, well, we were fighter attack. We weren't going to do much fighting because our standard loadout was 2 drop tanks, 2 sidewinders, the heat-seeking missiles on the wingtips, a Sparrow, a FLIR pod on the other Sparrow station, a Rockeye, and a HARM, high-speed anti-radiation missile. So we could do almost anything, and of course, 620 rounds at 20 millimeter. So we could do almost anything. We just weren't going to do it very fast or very long.
Right.
So I get the vector and I head over towards the missiles were coming out of Sirte, which is over on the kind of the western end of the Libyan shore. And by the time I get there, I didn't have any gas. The missiles are going off. The radar warning receivers going off. The EA-6Bs are being vectored in. They get a tanker for us. But I've got another Hornet. That was Papa George. So we got 2 shooters. We actually got 2 EA-6Bs for support and 1 tanker with about 2,000 pounds to give.
Wow.
So that was it. So we're done. We didn't have enough gas. So we went home. Later that day, I think Saratoga sent in A7s to shoot harms at the missile site. So anyway, from that day, game was on. We never saw any more Libyans because it was basically knockers up. If they sent anything out, we were going to kill it.
Right.
We finally, the go order went, and we did sink a couple of Bissell boats. In that night of the strike, we went in, got Benghazi, and I always thank the stars because we had mission planned for Tripoli, and of course, all we had was A6s. I think if the A6s had gone in that night, they would have been shredded. The fact that we only lost one airplane that night was an F-111, and that was coming off target, to me is a miracle because you all have seen the pictures of Baghdad on that night.
Yeah.
Um, they barrage fire everything they got. I think if they're firing stuff, they think it's better. It's not directed. The problem with that is, well, there's the good news is it's not directed.
Right.
The problem is when you're barrage firing everything, a lot of that crap's coming back down, and it doesn't matter if it explodes enough. If you hit that chunk of steel doing 500 knots in the wrong spot, it's as good as a kill. So
Yes.
anyway, sorry. Does that answer the question?
Resources. So, as far as resources go, uh, did you utilize any resources, say from the VA or any other nonprofits when you got out for any of the things that you'd seen? Uh,
Nope.
no,
You know how we treated it in those days. You just go to the bar,
right,
and
right. And if you're
so
not bleeding, you're fine.
that's correct.
Yep.
So my last active duty year was down at Key West, which again it was once in a lifetime opportunity. I knew the detailer, Warden Steve Davis. They said, you know, Warden, if I'm going to be a credible Hornet skipper, I really need to get some dedicated fighter stuff because I really didn't do much at Lemoore in 125. I was a ground attack guy, and of course I was an LSO on the boat. I didn't really do anything there, so I really need some fighter stuff. So I really need to be a bogey somewhere. And he said, well, all right, how about Key West? I went, okay. So I went down to Key West. So little did I know when I got down there, they called us the fish spotters. That was VF. Let's see, where is it here? Here, right here. Ah, here we go. So it was
Look
VF
at you.
45. So it was VF 45, which ended and eventually VFA 45. But at the time, it was VF 45. And we had 12 A4s. We had 6 kind of broke down A4Es. Most of them had bullet hole patches from Vietnam.
Oh
And we had
wow.
6 tired old TA4Js that we flew. So we would be bogeys. We would go out and fight. About the only thing you could simulate not terribly well was a MiG 15. That was about it. With a A4E. While I was there, politics being what they were, we got 12 brand new F-16Ns. One of which I got to pick up at the factory, which again, one in a lifetime opportunity.
Right.
The F-16N, it was a deal with Pakistan that had fallen through. So, uh, so there were these 16s sitting around, and the Navy said, we'll take those because what they really wanted was a supersonic 4th generation bogey. They had a supersonic bogey in the Kafir up at Oceana. The Kafir was built by the Israelis, and it was built by the Israelis for the Israelis, modeled off of Mirage 3. Basically, the Israelis, if you think about them, they need an airplane that goes really fast for about 50 miles to drop bombs and come back, right? Because that's where their threat area is.
Right.
So it did what it did. It would go really fast for not very long, and it couldn't turn. It was a delta wing, so it had one back turn, and that was it. So that was about all it could do. No radar. So this F-16 was like this cool thing, and the way the Navy bought it was they bought no suspension equipment, so there's no tanks, rails, nothing to carry anything except a Sidewinder simulator on one wingtip and a tax pod
Hmm.
instrument on the other one, and a GE 110 F-110 engine with 25,000 pounds of thrust. That was the good engine, because the other engine was the F100, which was Pratt. You can talk about the guys about that. Love Pratt. You know, they do a great job. It just takes them longer to mature an engine than GE. The F110 was a great engine, pretty bulletproof. So it was 25,000 pounds of thrust on a 23,000 pound airframe. So
Hmm.
for the aerodynamics guys out there, that's a 1-to-1 thrust airplane, which means you just about can accelerate going straight up. It's almost literally a rocket. So the red line on that airplane was 800 knots or 2.2 Mach, 2.2 Mach, 2.05 Mach. I thought it was 2.2. Anyway, so 800 knots, dynamic pressure limit on the canopy, because it was one big acrylic canopy. The dynamic pressure, the canopy would tend to come apart going faster than that. The Mach limit was actually supersonic airflow to the engine, because it was fixed intake. So using really cool design, you could keep the shock wave from hitting the engine out to about 2.2 Mach. Above that, the shock wave is going to hit the fan, in which case the airplane explodes.
Yeah, that's not a good thing.
Not a good thing. So with that combination, that airplane would go through both of those, not even slowing down. It wasn't even close. It was an incredible airframe. That being said, it was also a terrible instrument airplane. As I told you, it was the HUD was not a good instrument flying HUD. It was great for weapons delivery, but it was for what we used it for. A supersonic radar buoy. It was awesome. So that was my last active duty tour. When I left there, I went right to Delta, and I went right into the reserves. So the transition to the reserves was actually interesting, because I started training with Delta while I was still active duty. I was on terminal leave. Trained for Delta, and just got qualified as a 727 engineer when I went to my first reserve drill weekend.
Wow.
I had been married for a couple of years at that time. What I didn't have control of at that time was my life. So, speaking of control, could we take a break?
Yeah. It's totally up to you. If
A
you,
couple of minutes?
yeah, we can certainly do that. And go ahead, take care of what you need to take care of, and we will hang out. I'm going to check with the chats, see what they're up to, and how everything's going. Sound good?
Roll the music. I'll be right back.
All right, we got you. So, everybody who's out there in the chats, how's everybody doing so far? We all hanging in there pretty good? Uh, Go ahead, kind of give me a thumbs up if you're out there. Uh, let's see. We'll throw a little bit of music on while we wait for Jim to come back. He's got quite some stories, doesn't he? Quite impressive. Let's get the little music going while we wait. I agree, Jason. This really is an incredible story that he has some really interesting things, and I remember back in the 80s and the of course the Reagan administration and um of course Carter as well. That's kind of how old I am. So definitely a lot of information that really kind of helps put things in perspective that you didn't realize unless you were a part of the military at that time, or as the younger generation of military, and they hear those stories or things that they have to learn. So quite interesting. Does anybody have any questions for Jim that we can put on the screen for him to answer? Um, if you do, go ahead, get those out there, and we'll make sure to get those questions answered. I have also, while we're waiting, just so you know, I do have, as I said at the beginning of the show, I do have some shorts that I'm going to be dropping from some previous shows all the way back from October. So be sure to like and comment on those. You'll see some stuff maybe that you might have missed if you weren't live shows as well. Yeah, Kirk, absolutely happy to have brought Jim on. Thanks so very much also for introducing me to him. So it looks like we're getting almost close. Give me the thumbs up when you're ready, Jim. All right, we're getting, yeah, I'm sure I am excited for Roy as well. So we're going to go ahead. Looks like Jim is about ready. So I'm going to get him back on board here and get those questions out there if you've got any. All right, Jim, welcome.
Well, I want to address your question too, Carolee, because you're talking about resources, and really was, when we came back from cruise, they talked to us about getting back in there. And remember, your wives have been running the show for 6 months, so you just can't come in there and start, so we got all that stuff. And it was, a couple hours worth. When I was telling you, I didn't have control of my life because when I went to the reserve squadron, I was actually kind of a mid-grade lieutenant commander. So I was department head. I was the maintenance officer. So initially the safety officer, and then went to maintenance. So there's commitment to that. So it's a reserve squadron, which you think reserves will, it's a weekend warrior thing. Not really. We were flying, supporting active duty squadrons. We're still flying A4s, but we supported the active duty squadron. So we really flew 5 days a week, and we didn't fly on drill weekend other than on Sunday. So we had to take care of all the administrative reserve stuff on drill weekend. Other than that, we were flying 5 days a week.
Wow.
I flew more in the reserves than I did active duty.
Interesting.
Plus a full-time job at Delta.
Right.
So I was basically working 25 to 27 days a month. So I would go on a trip for Delta, 3 or 4 day trip, come home, and that afternoon fly with reserves, and then put in a few days with reserves. Plus, we were so busy in the reserves. Of course, you have 2 weeks active duty training. That's a standard reserve commitment, right? We had drill weekend every month.
Mm-hmm.
They wanted us to do a week of spec ac a quarter, special active duty. So that was basically you're on a debt somewhere. So that's a month right there.
Wow.
So, and we sent out debts the last year I was there was 1993. We had detachments out like over 200 days. And when we would send anywhere from 2 plane to 6 plane detachments out to places like Cecil Field, Key West, Fallon, Bagotville, Canada, Brunswick, Maine, Eglin Air Force Base. So we would provide ACM services. We would chase Tomahawk missiles. We would do ship services where we simulated cruise missiles. We towed gunnery banners. We were a composite squadron. So after about 3 or 4 years of that, I was exhausted. I just didn't know I was exhausted. So
yeah,
and I got divorced predictably in the middle of that. It was liquid therapy, and it was finally, fortunately, and this is the weirdest thing. I don't tell many people this. It was actually a dream I had that woke me up, and it was my mom and dad. My mother and father were in the dream, sitting at a table covered with a green cloth, and my mom said, "This has got to stop." That's all she said. And when I woke up, it was like, holy shit, I better get control of this. And that's when I started getting sober and got control of my life, and figured out it was kind of funny because I stopped flying for the reserves and just went to work for Delta, had a blast. By that time I was on the L-1011. I was an engineer on the L-1011, just freaking awesome airplane, and I was a mid-grade, relatively senior second officer on that, flight engineer. So we had L-10s that would go from Atlanta out to Portland, Oregon, one leg, 24-hour layover, one leg back. Because it was the first leg, it was an extended range version, international version, because it was the first leg of the airplane going to Tokyo.
Oh, wow.
So we'd go out, and it's all the little, they had the Japanese speakers on board, and we get our little bento box lunches and stuff. It was a riot. And that was when Portland was a gorgeous city. It was before it had been, it's destroyed now. It was a fabulous, fabulous place. Great layover. It was just idyllic. And I said, civilian stuff, I could get used to this. And I was older by that time. I was already commander, 05. And I figured, well, I guess, I'm going to be a bachelor. And that's it, because I was on a layover down in Palm Beach when I met my wife.
So when you least expect it.
Yeah, least expected. So I did meet a woman up there in Virginia Beach that helped me get sober. I did go to some AA, had a great sponsor who was a retired Navy captain, great dude, um, and got my head together. And once I met my wife, and my wife's a good Christian, we started going to church, had our kids, and it's like, wow, that was the therapy that I probably needed before. It would have saved a lot of brain cells and heartbeats.
Right.
Because, as anybody can tell you, and I know Kirk's been through this too, I was not a very happy camper for quite a while. It was just get up every day and go to work and do your job
Over and over.
and try to survive. So, the guys from Vietnam kind of got shafted, and they paid the ultimate price. I was in that sweet spot. I I was when the Gulf War happened, when the first Gulf War happened, um, when the balloon went up over there, I was in VFC 12, and we were flying A4s. We had no combat role of any kind.
Right.
So a lot of my buddies were over there, and I've often thought if I had stayed in, there's a very good chance I would have been in the Red Sea, probably in VFA 81. I would have been department head in the VFA 81 with either Mike Anderson, the skipper, or Bob Stumpf. And it might have been me instead of Scott Spiker getting shot down that night.
Yeah.
So, so there was a lot that I wish I had done, but there's a lot that I'm probably glad I missed. And because of that, because of my timing and everything, because of meeting my wife, there was a lot of spiritual healing that I have gone through that has helped me in my life, in my spirituality. When when you're flying, when you're young, you pretty much think you're bulletproof anyway.
Right.
If you didn't think you were bulletproof, you probably shouldn't be there.
Yep.
And it was like I told you before, the lucky bag and the experience bag. Um, uh, that luck bag is going to run out at some point. The experience bag's really big and got a lot of stories. Like I've been yakking here for an hour and a half now or something.
Sure, we'll go with that.
Yeah. So, so and when you get Roy on, he's going to be like Kirk. These guys, he keeps talking about me, but they are my heroes. The guys that have done this stuff now, because it has been our longest war. It's our
Yes.
longest hot war by a long shot, and they have seen command climate from pretty good to pretty bad.
Right. And the thing too, I want to put this out there. You are obviously, we all have coulda, woulda, shouldas, right? In
Yep.
our and from an outsider hearing your story, to me, I think you're right where you're supposed to be in your life. You've you found your happiness and in your wife and your family, as a whole, and you're right where you should be, I think, at this point.
Well, we're all where it should be. It's just whether you accept it or not, I think.
Well,
Is
exactly. I think, and it
is the
sounds like to me, like for the most part, you've accepted this, and I think
yeah,
that makes life easier,
it
right?
does
You're not fighting your life every moment of
every day.
every day.
And it was fatiguing. I mean, it
Yeah,
was horribly fatiguing. I think that's one of the reasons I just got worn out, and
right,
finally was able. Fortunately, I had some support there um, that was healthy and really helped me focus on the rest of my life, which healed me enough to be able to meet my wife,
right.
because she always says she's not a military wife. She never would have gotten it. She actually would have been a great military wife. I tell her that, she doesn't believe me, but she's just an incredible soul. She runs a Bible study for a group of girls. She's helped me to understand and read and study and grow. And she would have been an incredible COF. I probably would have been a shitty skipper, just saying, because I know me. but she would have been a great person. So, and she was there. And you've probably heard this before. I wasn't looking, and she wasn't looking, and all of a sudden,
There it is.
there it is.
So,
So,
Kirk says, "Thank you, brother. You've been there and done that. Don't forget that. Much
I,
respect."
I know, buddy. I know, and we'll keep talking. I'm just trying to get you to your next step there, dude. If you know what I'm talking about, because time's a wasting. Um, which here we are 2024, and I don't know how you're doing, and we're not going to talk about politics, but I don't have a good feel about this year. So and again, I've got well, not only your guys, we've got a friend who's got a son in the Marines who actually he was a mortarman, loving it, but he just took a what was it, maybe Kirk remembers, but it's a uh, embassy tour. I think he's doing
Oh,
like
okay.
it's I think it's not embassy security, but it's something to do with intel or something. And he is in Germany, I think. So, you know, there's a lot happening, and
Yeah, all over the world, and
over.
it's
So
you can't keep
resources.
track.
I think the other thing. So I'll just try to finish up, and then I don't know how long I'm going to do this, but the interesting thing, the another near death, I guess. Um, when I was in my reserve squadron, one of the reasons I stopped flying was that one, I really didn't want to be skipper, too lazy. Two, there were two other guys in my year group that were in line. I was senior to both of them. One guy was on the bottom seniority list at Delta, looking at furlough. This was in 1993. The other one had been furloughed from Northwest already, so he needed a job. And I had ejected from one of the A4s about 6 months prior, and it was kind of a weird. So this is a great story. All right, this is a funny story. So the debt is over, and we're down in Key West, and I've got Omar 7. It's one of our Super Foxes, great airplane. In fact, it was the hottest airplane. It was the fastest A4 F that we had, Super Fox we had, because you could go side to side, and you go, okay, 3, 2, 1, go. Both go to military, and number 7 just kind of walk away from everybody else. It's got to be something. So they would check it, and they would, trim it and check the engine, the instruments, and
Kirk wants to know MSG Marine Sec Guard.
yeah, I'm not sure if it's. I'm not sure. I'll have to. It's Don Barnett's kid, Red Tadpole. It's Seth Barnett. I'll find out. I'll figure it out.
Okay.
I think it's some kind of intel thing he's doing.
And that's okay. That's probably not necessarily anything that
No, yeah, that's
with
too much. No,
yeah,
he's in the Marines and he's deployed.
right.
Is probably all you need to know. So anyway, so the debt's over. I'm going to go up and visit Chip, my old LSO roommate. He lives in Navarre, so I'm going to fly into Eglin, or actually Hurlburt. So I'm climbing out of Key West, and the firelight comes on. I'm like, ah, crap. So I turn right back. Now, single seat fighters, if you haven't flown those, if you're on fire, it's really pretty simple. If you're on fire, throttle idle. If the firelight doesn't go out, eject. It's pretty two-step process.
Right.
So I'm heading back to thing. I declare the emergency. Go to idle. The light goes out. I was like, oh, okay. Well, I'm not going to make it back to the field at idle. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to need a little bit more. So I butt the throttle up a little bit. The light comes back on. Now it doesn't go out.
Oh.
Now I'm on fire. Okay, blah, blah, blah. I'm getting back. I'm about 10 miles north of Key West, maybe 8 miles. I mean, I can see the field. I'm talking to the tower. In the meantime, the fire's burning. I'm staying with the airplane because I still have control. I should have been out, but I'm staying with it. The flight control hydraulics bleed out, so I know I'm definitely on fire. I can't really see any smoke and everything else. Then the utilities go. The utility hydraulic system is this is the secondary and big hydraulic system. So that's other flight controls, landing gear, things like that. But it also is the stabilizer, is the elevator power. So the elevator fares and the airplane starts pitching over. So I'm going light in the seat and I'm at about 3,000 feet, 3,500 feet. about 270 knots, and I shell out. So amazingly enough, I have the wherewithal to say, Omar 7 ejecting, ejecting, ejecting. That went out over the radio. The problem with that is I go to the lower ejection handle and pull before my left hand gets to the handle to hold on. So as I, remember all this. I remember the sound, I remember the canopy going, I remember the seat firing, and then since I didn't have a grip with my left arm, it flails in 270 knots of wind, so it dislocates my shoulder. We wore these pretty cool helmets. The new one, which is right up there in the on the shelf, they're form fit. They're supposed to fit really well, and that goes off my head like it wasn't even attached.
Oh my gosh.
They took the oxygen mask with it, which takes the microphone and the oxygen mask, bashes me in the nose.
Oh no.
Somebody cold cocked me. So I remember hearing the chute rustle out. That's a good sound because they had a ballistic spreader gun. It would spread the chute out. So I hear that, and now I'm completely disoriented because I'm 180 out from the direction I was heading. So my shoulder's out. I'm in my chute. So you're trained to do IRS-OK. So I is inflate. So you inflate the lobes of your LPA. I could do that. R is release your seat pan to get your survival pack comes out. It inflates your raft. IRS snap the lobes of your LPA together. That's your flotation. O is your oxygen mask. Take your oxygen mask out. Well, it's gone.
Right.
There's no mask. I'm covered with blood, and now I don't know what to do. Because the last K is Coke fittings. Go for your Coke fittings. So you release those when you hit the water, so your sheet falls off to the side. But now I'm sitting there, and it's like, I look down, the raft didn't inflate. It's just a big ball of stuff that was all wrapped up together. I went, well, that didn't go well either. What else? I'm bleeding. I'm going to shark, infested waters. That's probably not going to be that good. So I hit the water. I actually got rid of the chute. There was a little breeze, so the chute fell off. I actually, amazingly enough, and I don't remember how I did this, I got my raft out, inflated it, and got into the raft with one arm. So I'm
Wow.
sitting there in my raft trying to collect my thoughts. I was close enough to Key West. If anybody to the Keys, north of the Keys is kind of what we call the flats. And it's all real shallow. Think about bone fishing and things like that. So there's bone fishermen out there and little boats. So I'm in my raft. This little boat comes up, a couple of civilians. They go, are you okay? And I'm like, yeah. I'm okay. I'm not okay, but I'm okay. My shoulder's still out. The next boat comes up, and I hear this, Fingers, is that you? And so I look up, and it's Donnie Schmidt. Who's Donnie Schmidt? When I was in VF 45 active duty at Key West, I was the maintenance officer when I left. He was my maintenance material control officer. So he was one of my staff in the maintenance department.
Wow.
He was out fishing. He had his wife and kids with him. In his boat, he had an open top fisherman. And he was actually heading back into port. His wife actually saw the airplane hit and says, hey, Donnie. And he looks around, so he sees my chute. And he goes, oh, crap, that's one of ours. So he turns around, and he picks me up out of the water. So now I'm sitting on his boat, bleeding. My shoulder's out. I finally get it back in. I was able to put it back in. So the next thing that happens is when you eject, there's supposed to be a emergency locator transmitter in the seat pan that gets activated when you go out. Well, it didn't activate either. At Key West, at Boca Chica, there's an F-14 waiting to take off for Oceana to go back. He's listening to this. He knows there's an airplane coming in to trap on, I think it was runway, I can't remember, it was 21, I think is what I was going to trap on. And so he hears me checking in. Omar 7 checking in, I need to press. Okay, Omar 7, clear to land, runway 21. And then he hears me give the eject call. And then he hears Tower saying, Omar 7, the winds are blah, 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 the gear's rigged. And he said, Tower, he's already ejected. He's out of the airplane. I'm taking off. He said, fuck you, I'm not leaving. And so, because he was expecting to hear the ELT. So he hears me eject. There's no ELT. So he's thinking, oh, this isn't good. So he takes off, and sure as shooting, he sees the mud puddle where my airplane hit, doing about, I don't know, 350 going straight down into
Wow.
about 15 feet of water in a couple of boats. And he does a flyby, and I wave to him and say, see ya. Not smart enough to have my PRC 90 in here and start talking to him. I'm not that cool. I'm still in a daze. So now we got to get me back to shore because the helo, he's getting spun up. He could have gotten a rescue, but Donnie said, hey, look, ship to shore. I'll take him to Trumbo Point and drop him there. Have the ambulance meet us there. So we were going to go through the flats where if tide's high enough, you can go through there. Well, it was low tide. So we had to go all the way around the Northwest Channel into rough water, bouncing, finally get to Trumbo Point where the ambulance is supposed to be, right? So there's no ambulance, of course.
Oh
Right.
my gosh.
Right. So I'm soaking wet. I got all my stuff with me, and Trumbo Point right there at the dock is Admiral's Row. So that's where all the big wigs and the wing commander and all that stuff. So there's an Admiral's house there, and I'm dripping wet. Walk up, ma'am, can I borrow your phone? So call the base. I said, hey, look, I'm over here. Come and get me. So the ambulance finally found me, and that was it. So now I've ditched the airplane. I've got nothing. Literally, I have my flight suit and my boots. That's all I have left.
Wow.
Everything was in the airplane. And so I borrow some money, go to whatever it was, Kmart or something, get, some clothes, some shoes, and that was it. The skipper calls me, said, Fingers, I heard you're okay, so just checking in, you're sure okay? Well, I thought I was okay. What I didn't realize was, my shoulder had been out several times. That reamed it out pretty well, so it was going to be coming out until I got it fixed a long time later. When I went out, sitting lighter in the seat, the A4 cockpit is incredibly cramped. So when I went out, my left boot hit the glare shield on the way out, which I didn't realize ruptured my Achilles tendon. So I get back to Norfolk right away within a day or two. And about day 4, my ankle's really hurting. I mean, it's like, man, I think, it's like being in a car wreck. So I'm kind of sore, but it should be getting better. And now my ankle's turning black.
Wow.
So my ankle's black. I was like, listen. So I go to the flight surgeon. And he goes, oh, holy crap. You ruptured your Achilles tendon. I'm like, yeah, no kidding. So that was a few more weeks. Finally got over that. And then went back to flying with Delta. And it was finally, at that point, looking back on it, it was like, this flying shit, I don't want to die doing this. And actually what got me was I started having panic attacks, claustrophobia. And if you ever sit in an A4 cockpit, if you go to the museum at Pensacola, you can sit in an A4 cockpit and you can see what I'm talking about.
Mm-hmm.
It is like slipping into an Indy car, except the canopy comes down around your head and you can't see the sides of the control panel. You have to kind of duck your head down. It was kind of an eye opener. So that was the start of that. Stopped flying, went to work for Delta, and had the opportunity to be on the ground floor of their critical incident response program as that was coming along. So it was this whole thing of cockpit resource management, mentally taking care of people, and how you do that. So very fortunate to be on the ground floor of that. Went to school for it. Actually got to do it a couple of times. The debrief, we had one worker at Delta whose mom was a flight attendant on TWA 800. So I got to do the 1-year anniversary for her. And then I did the 1-year anniversary of a fatal that we had in Pensacola where an MD-88 engine blew up and killed 2 people on the airplane. So we had the pilots and the flight attendants in on that debrief. And it was very interesting because it was 2 different airplanes. You can look that accident up, but the guys up front thought they had initially a generator failure, and then the engine failed. In the back of the airplane, a chunk of turbine disc had gone through the fuselage, decapitated one of the passengers, and killed another one. So it was a mother and son sitting in those seats, and those people in the back thought they were going to die. So it was a very interesting debrief. So out of that training and everything, I was able to deal with my own demons. It was kind of mutually
Right.
supportive. Um, so that put me in a place where, I was better. Plus, being sober helps. Really does.
Right. That's exactly right.
So in
Well,
substance use now, and I'm sorry to cut you off, but the guys coming back now, um, when I was doing it, the drugs weren't the thing.
right.
Now the drugs are everywhere. I mean,
Oh, yeah.
the drug culture. And I know vets have had, and guys, I'm not in the VA system, never dealt with the VA. I've actually heard pretty good things about some of the stuff. There's always the horror stories, but we have a new VA center that's opened up down south of us in Zebulon that I've heard nothing but actually good things about. The people are great. They do a great job. So thank
Good.
God. And of course, that's only because of one man, I believe. That's because of Trump.
Yeah. And everybody, like you said, they've all got their stories. So JM says the Berry Hill Bums are proud of Fingered Tadpole. Great. So, all right. Well, as much as I would love to continue having the conversation with you, we're coming up on 3 hours.
Three. What?
Yes. Yes. And
I'm not good at the
I
math.
know. So I have to say this. When I first talked to you on the phone, you told me you had nothing really to talk about. And I want to thank you so very much for your stories because very entertaining. You're a very entertaining speaker and very lively and engaging. And your story is very uplifting in how you dealt with things and where you're at today in your life. And I think that's great for our viewers and those out here in the chats as well to see. I mean, every veteran goes through their own issues, their own mental things. And again, it just goes to show that there are people out there that can help and this is a great place to network on feel free network with people here if you're out there and you need somebody to talk to. You can either get a hold of me and I can get you in touch with some of the veterans that I've talked to. And I'm sure that any one of you are willing to help another fellow veteran. So, but definitely appreciate, Jim, you coming on.
Yeah, I can't believe it's 3 hours. I thought it was two. It's at least I didn't start talking about Delta Airlines because I'm a docent at the museum, and it was kind of interesting one day. I mean, I'll talk to people as long as they want to talk. I actually had four engineers from ESPN. One of them had rented some time in the flight simulator we have in the museum. I ended up talking to them for 4.5 hours.
Oh,
But
wow.
it's not my fault. They kept asking questions. If you stopped asking questions, then I'm good.
Right.
You're welcome. You're welcome, Warren. And
So, yeah.
Paul,
So Kirk says, Juan, thank you.
yeah, and Ted Paul, man, you're my brother, and I thank God that I got to meet you. It was one of those things. We met at Berry Hill, and it was one of those things as I remember it. And Ted Cole can fill you in, but it was like almost immediately, I knew this guy. Like, okay, I know this guy. I get this guy. I like him, and because as you know from talking to him, he's got an incredible story, and he's a shooter. So. Um,
Yep.
just appreciate you, guy. So, and thank you all for listening. I'm sorry to keep you so long. I had no idea. So now you know, Carol Lee, don't ask me again.
Oh, no, I loved it. I absolutely loved it. JM says, Kirk, you guys are my heroes. So, again, I really appreciate that and you coming on and taking the time. And please be sure to thank your wife for allowing us
Sure
to
will.
take time away from her. And again, thank you so very much from me and from everybody out in the chats that has typed it in. Thank you for your service and your
Thank you.
sacrifices. We really appreciate you.
Thank you, ma'am. Appreciate
So,
it.
All right, y'all, we're going to go ahead and sign on out. So we will see you again next Sunday, 6 p.m. Central
Yes.
Time. Yep. Y'all have a great night.
Yeah, yeah.